that seeks to set out areas that shall be identified for purposes of hosting cities, municipalities, or towns in various counties, and this is based on populations of those particular locations. For a city, it is stated that it should be at least 250,000 people. For a municipality, at least 50,000 people, and a population of at least 10,000 people in order for an area to be considered as a town. Yet another bill from the Senate is pending before the House, and this one is the County Government's Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 11 of the year 2017, and it seeks to amend the County Governments Act number 17 of 2012 in order to clarify the commencement and seating of a county assembly, to put in place a legal framework for establishment of the office of a deputy speaker or a county assembly. This bill seeks to clarify circumstances for the removal of a speaker of a county assembly, the recall of members of a county assembly, the powers of the governor to appoint and dismiss county executive committee members. It also seeks to provide a legal framework for assumption of office of the governor by the deputy governor and appointment of a new deputy governor in case the one that is there is removed, or in case that particular position is vacant, and also ensure independence, professionalism, transparency, and promotion of equity in the functioning of county public service boards. Also lined up, the second reading of the Warehouse Receipt System Bill, Senate Bill number 10 of the year 2017, that seeks to provide a legal framework for development and regulation of a warehouse receipt system for agricultural commodities. And this one will help address marketing challenges, especially regarding produce in the cereals and grains subsectors in the country. It will allow for licensing and inspection of warehouses, and also for the application of licenses and authorization to operate within a set warehouse receipts system. If time allows this afternoon, members shall also consider a report of the 49th session of the ACP Parliamentary Assembly and intersessional meetings of the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly. Both were held in Brussels, Belgium, between the 20th and 22nd of the month of March. And this particular report was laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, 24th July 2018. Yet another report also pending before the House on the 138th Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union, IPU, and related meetings. The leader of this delegation was the Honorable William Kamket. And these meetings were held in Geneva, Switzerland, between the 22nd and 28th of March 2018. And this report was laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, 24th July 2018. That and much more coming your way in this broadcast that is made possible by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, a sitting to be presided over by the Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Justin Muturi. My name is Vereso Mwanga, On behalf of the entire crew, I welcome you to follow the proceedings. Good afternoon and enjoy.
Let us pray. Almighty God, who in your wisdom and goodness have appointed the office of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor as your servants whom you be pleased to call to the performance of important trusts in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that have come under deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to enhance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests were committed to our charge. Amen.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
I'll be doing that communication before we get to order number 8. But honor members, before we proceed, allow me to recognize the presence in the speakers gallery and in the public gallery of students and pupils from the following institutions: Shelley Academy, Likoni constituency, Mombasa County; Kaimosi Friends Primary School, Hamisi constituency, Vihiga County; Naitoti Primary School, Narok South constituency, Narok County; Nyandundo Primary School, Olkalau constituency, Nyandarua County; Garrison School, Laikipia East constituency, Laikipia County; and those from Bishop Muge Primary School, Mosob constituency, Nandi County. They are all welcome to observe proceedings in the National Assembly this afternoon. Next.
Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Majority Whip.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Majority Leader, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, August 9th, 2018. The report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of the Kenya School of Government for the year ended 30th June 2017 and the certificate therein. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I have information that Dr. Makali Mulu may not be making it for this report. Is he? Oh, Dr. Mulu, you are back. Very well, proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, August 9th, 2018. Report of the delegation from the Youth Parliament of Kenya to the 4th Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Africa Region Youth Parliament meeting held in Kampala, Uganda on 14th to 19th April 2018. Thank you.
The Chairperson, Parliamentary Broadcasting and Library Committee, Honorable Joash Nyamoko Nyamache.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, August 9th, 2018. Reports of the Joint Delegation of Committee on Parliamentary Broadcasting and Library Services and the Departmental Committee on Communication, Innovation, and Information on, number 1, the Global System Mobile Association World Congress held from 26th February to 1st March 2018 in Barcelona, Spain. 2, the second Artificial Intelligence for Good Global Summit held on ITU headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland, from 15th to 17th May 2018. And number 3, Mr. Speaker, the visit to the National Broadcasters Show held in Las Vegas, Nevada from 7th to 12th April 2018. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chairperson, next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Honorable Janet Nangabo.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to give the notice of the following motion, that aware that Article 43 of the Constitution provides that everybody has the right to the highest attainable standard of health, which includes the rights to healthcare service, including the reproductive health, and further aware that of fiscal vaginal fistula, VVF, advertising conditions that affects women, girls across the country, and which has seen many of the patients victimized, abandoned by their communities. Deeply concerned that it is estimated that more than 2 million women, girls live with fistula, and that 4 out of every 1,000 deliveries in Kenya results in fistula, which results in between 50,000 to 100,000 new fistula cases in every year. Alarmed that according to availability reports, thought fistula is treatable with proper medication attention only to 7.5% of patients with fistula are able to access the medical care for their conditions, mainly due to the related costs and lack of suitable trained surgery. And the House urges the government to provide specialist training for the fistula surgery and subsidize the cost for fistula surgery in all the health facilities in order to make treatment accessible and affordable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next order.
Order number 7, statements.
Majority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 44-2A, I rise on behalf of the Majority Leader to give the following statement on behalf of the House Business Committee. The committee met this week at the rise of the House to prioritize business for consideration. Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday, the following bills are scheduled for debate in second reading. 1, the Finance Bill 2018. 2, the Circle Societies Amendment Bill 2018. 3, the Warehouse Receipt System Bill 2018. 4, the Health Laws Amendment Bill 2018. 5, the Urban Areas and Cities Amendment, Senate Bill number 4 of 2017, and 6, the County Governments Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 11 of 2017. We will also consider the Senate law, the Statute Law, Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2018 in Committee of the Whole House. Honorable Speaker, in the same week, we will continue with the report of the joint sittings of the departmental committees on agriculture and livestock, and Trade, Industry, and Cooperatives on the inquiry into alleged importation of contaminated sugar into the country, should we not conclude it today. We will also consider several pending reports, including one, the second report of the Procedure and House Rules Committee on the consideration of the amendments to the standing orders. Two, the report of the Committee on Member Services and Facilities on a benchmarking visit to the Parliament of the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. Three, the report of the 49th session of the SCP Parliamentary Assembly and inter-sessional meetings. Four, the report of the 138th Assembly of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, IPU, and the related meetings. Honorable Speaker, on questions before committees, the following cabinet secretaries are scheduled to appear before committees on Tuesday, 14th August 2018. The the Attorney General will appear before the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs to answer a question from the Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, MP, in the mini chamber, Count Hall, at 10 a.m. And the Cabinet Secretary for Transport and Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development before the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works, and Housing to answer questions from the Honorable Bernard Chinali, MP, the Honorable Gabriel Cargo, MP, the Honorable Abdul Soamad Sharif Nasir, MP, the Honorable Rueda Mohammed Obo, MP, in the mini chamber, Count Hall, at 11 a.m. Finally, Honorable Speaker, the House business will reconvene on Tuesday, 14th August 2018, at the rise of the House to consider the business for the coming week. Honorable Speaker, I now wish to lay the statement on the table of the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next.
Order number 8, motion, report on the inquiry into alleged importation of illegal and contaminated sugar into the country.
Honour members, the member for Roiro, you are likely to remain in that position for some time. The member for Nakuru East, if you could take a seat. Honour members, I assume that those others who wish to remain standing. Honour members, I have this communication to make, which is guiding debates on the report of the inquiry into alleged importation of illegal and contaminated sugar in the country. Honourable members, before we proceed with this order relating to the consideration of the report by the Joint Departmental Committees on Agriculture and Livestock and Trade, Industry and Cooperatives on the inquiry into the alleged importation of illegal and contaminated sugar in the country, I wish to make this communication, which is aimed at facilitating the business of the House in view of certain matters that have arisen or been raised relating to part of the contents of the report. Honourable members, you will recall that on Wednesday, 1st of August, 2018, I interrupted the business of the House to allow the chairpersons of the Joint Committees on Agriculture, Livestock and Trade and Industry and Cooperatives to table the aforementioned report long after the order on papers under which the laying of reports would ordinarily take place long after it had been dispensed with. My decision was informed by the importance of the task undertaken by the two committees, the sensitivity of the matters that were under investigation, and the public interest in the questions sought to be addressed. Honourable members, even though the House Business Committee had neither sat nor scheduled the matter as part of the business for consideration that afternoon, as is the practice, I did instruct that the highly anticipated report be laid on the table of the House and the matter nevertheless be considered the following day so as to cushion against speculations associated with any inordinate delay on such a sensitive matter. My decision was also informed by the fact that this House has the responsibility of deliberating and resolving issues of concern to the people, a function conferred upon each one of you by Article 95, Clause 2 of the Constitution. Suffice to say, the issue of the alleged presence of contraband and probably contaminated sugar in the country is one that has been and is still a huge concern to the people of Kenya, and they are looking up to this House through the two committees to get to the bottom of it. Honourable members, moving on, upon the report being laid, I received representations from a host of members, including some of the members of the Joint Committee, regarding some of the recommendations contained in the report. Indeed, the following day, after the report had been tabled, I received more representations from members, including those of the House Business Committee, to defer discussions in order to afford all members an opportunity to read the report. Requests were also made to me to defer the report so as to allow sufficient time for those wishing to propose amendments to the report to observe the timeline set out under Standing Order number 55 relating to issuance of notices of amendments. Honourable members, as you may be aware, that standing order requires the proposal of an amendment to a motion to hand the proposed amendments in writing to the clerk of the House at least 2 hours before the order is read. Honourable members, you will also recall that I forthwith ordered for the reorganization of the business that afternoon and deferred the particular order relating to the report to the next soonest date agreed to by the House Business Committee. Permit me to also bring to the attention of this House the fact that I have, in the past few days, received further representations from members of the Joint Committee who have expressed concern that some of the recommendations as worded may not fully represent the spirit of the resolutions of the committees. Conscious of the gravity of the matter, I have certainly also engaged in discourse with the two chairpersons of the committees with a view to establishing the actual position. Honourable members, before I proceed, I wish to state that I am dismayed that the questions relating to the accuracy or otherwise of certain parts, including findings of the report, were conversed more in the media than before this House. Without belaboring the point, honourable members, you will also recall that I recently guided the House on the investigatory mandate of committees, and I urged that committees, and indeed its members, do refrain from anticipating debate on a motion of which notice has been given contrary to provisions of Standing Order number 85. Of concern is the equally disappointing manner in which members have conducted themselves in canvassing the issues in the media. No sooner and the chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Trade and Industry tabled on the report that the media reports became awash with information that some members of the joint committees and disowned the contents of the report. While honourable members may not have had the intention to besmirch the committee, the accusatory tone of some of the comments in the media reports has yielded premature and undesired reactions from the public even before the report is debated. This was indeed conduct unbecoming of the concerned honourable members, as it is expected that any concerns relating to contents of a report should be addressed through appropriate parliamentary channels, more so bearing in mind the provisions of Standing Order number 85, which prohibit members from anticipating debate. Ventilating on a matter before the House outside the domain of the debating chamber goes against the long-held view that Parliament is an august House. Indeed, on 9th of July 1971, the then Speaker, Honourable Mati, ruled that it was improper to carry on a debate in the newspapers on a matter that is active in the House. And I quote, "Honourable members, my attention has been drawn to a report in one newspaper, the Daily Nation, where it is reported that one honourable member made a statement on the Trade Disputes Amendment Bill to the press. I would like to remind honourable members that this is completely out of order. It is not done once a matter is before this House. It is debated here, and we do not carry on the debate in newspapers on bills or motions which are presented to the House. I hope the honourable member did not intend to offend these rules. It is improper for any honourable member to carry on a debate in the papers on something that is going on here in the House," close the quotes. And again, on 15th of July, 1971, Speaker Mate ruled, and I quote, "It is all right to make general statements, perhaps when an organization does not agree with something. But when you go on as far as giving the details on the things which you either said here or could have said here, then that is going too far, and it makes the work of the House almost useless." Honourable members, it is paramount to remind ourselves of our constitutional duties and obligations as members of Parliament, as conferred by the Constitution, and more importantly, on the duty we owe to our people. That is to provide clarity where there is confusion, to provide direction where there is none, to provide reassurance where there is anxiety, to provide peace where there is dispute, and to give hope where there is despair. This, honourable members, should be our marking scheme, our guiding principle, and the light that guides how we execute our duties, even in our respective committees. Having said that, allow me now to interrogate the following two questions that have arisen concerning the report before this House. Honourable members, making your way, you may come in. Make your way quickly, make your way quickly. Make your way quickly. Honourable members coming in, please make your way into the chamber quickly so that we may proceed. I just gave you an opportunity to take your seat, not to come fetch water. Now you have to stand there. You have assumed the role of a waiter in this chamber, apparently. Honourable members, I indicated that I now want to interrogate the following two questions that have arisen concerning the report before this House. First, what is the authenticity of the report before this House? And number two, did the committees miss any procedural steps in compiling the final report? Honourable members, in order to address the first question on the authenticity of the report before this House, allow me to state that I am guided by the provisions of Standing Order number 199, which provides as follows, and I quote, 1. The report of a select committee shall be prepared and kept in the same form as the votes and proceedings of a committee of the whole House, and in such other form as may be prescribed in the committee manual. 2, the report of a select committee, having been adopted by a majority of the members, shall be signed by the chairperson on behalf of the committee. 3, a select committee shall adopt its report in a meeting attended by a majority of its members. Honourable members, in light of the foregoing, as your Speaker, I'm now compelled to answer the following questions which sets out the procedural parameters of authenticating a committee report. 1, is the report properly before the House? The answer is yes, having been properly laid by the joint chairperson last week. 2, are there votes and proceedings of the report in form of minutes appended? The answer is yes. 3, has the report been adopted by a majority of the members? The minutes attest that the answer to this is yes. 4, has the report been signed by the chairperson of the committee? To answer this, honourable members, page number 62 of the report indicated that the answer is yes, it's signed. 5, was the report adopted in a meeting attended by a majority of its members? The minutes of the 24th sitting of the Joint Committee held on 1st of August 2018, and in which 28 members were present, attest that the answer is also in the affirmative. In this regard, honourable members, and in accordance with the provision of Standing Order number 199, the report before this House is therefore authentic as it complies with the requirements of that Standing Order. Honourable members, moving on to the last question on whether the Joint Committee overlooked or missed any steps in arriving at the final report, I'm further guided by the provision of Standing Order number 199, subsection 5 and 6, which provides, and I quote, a report having been adopted by a majority of members, a minority or dissenting report may be appended to the report by the members of the committee. 2, a report of a select committee, including any minority report, together with the minutes of the proceedings of the committee, shall be laid by the chairperson of the committee within 14 days of conclusion of its proceedings. Honourable members, pursuant to these provisions of this Standing Order number 199, 5 and 6, and considering the representations I have received from the various members of the Joint Committee, I am persuaded that the Joint Committee may have missed an important step while considering and preparing a final report on this matter. That is, the opportunity to also have a divergent views or a minority report recorded as contemplated under Standing Order 199, 5 and 6, if the conduct of such of the members following the tabling of the report is anything to go by. Permit me, honourable members, to remind this House of the communication I issued on 30th of July 2014 on the place of minority reports and admissibility of committee reports on the removal of IEBC commissioners. Due to the importance of the matter at hand, I will quote a number of the findings in that communication, and the House was guided thus. I quote, there is a universally accepted principle of democracy that the majority shall have their way, but the minority shall also have their say. This principle does not decree that the majority ought to emasculate the voices of the minority, nor does it give the minority a blanket check to say anything under the sun. To the contrary, this principle encourages the majority in any group to recognize and take into account the views of the minority in that group. In parliamentary parlance, the application of this principle is not new. The chairperson rules on relevance. The indication of a minority report is a mechanism to allow the House to be acquainted with the completeness of the issues about which there has been disagreement before the House can make a resolution. Honourable members, the reading of these standing orders indicate that as an advance of our previous practice, those with minority views have been accorded the higher privilege, as they are allowed to have their views recorded substantially and not just a mere mention, and in a rare occasion, have a dissenting report appended to the main report. This is in keeping with the spirit of our new constitution to protect the rights of both the majority and the minority. However, should a committee not reach consensus, this does not imply that there should be two reports of a committee or a separate report compiled by the minority. The rule of thumb is that there can be only one report of a committee. That is a report that has been supported by the majority of the membership of that committee, which may contain, as part of it, a minority report. Honorable members, it is my considered view that some members of the Joint Committee who had a contrary view to that held by the majority lost an opportunity to prepare a minority report that would have been, in my view, also enriched debate in the House by informing the House on the substance of the divergent views that may have been held by them. It lowers the dignity of the House when we fail to observe our own rules on anticipation of debate and taking it outside the House, and more importantly, by not utilizing avenues available to express our divergent views. Honourable members, having disposed of the questions of authenticity of the report and the probability of the missed steps, allow me now to inform the House that, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 55, the Office of the Clerk did receive proposed amendments to the report from 3 honourable members. These are the Majority Party Whip, the Honourable Benjamin Washiali, the member for Homa Bay, the Honourable Gladys Wanga, and nominated member, Honourable Geoffrey Osotsi. As you may have noticed, by now, those amendments are published in the order paper for this sitting, save for those proposed by the Majority Party Whip, which failed to meet the standard test of admissible amendments. For the information of the House, the Majority Party Whip was proposing to introduce new annexures and recommendations whose basis was new evidence that he was proposing to introduce in the report by amending the observations part of the report. You will agree with me that allowing such would have been procedurally untenable. Should the member have intended to have that evidence considered, he should have tabled it either in the House when the matter was canvassed or in the Joint Committee sittings during the evidence-taking sessions. Introducing new evidence at this penultimate stage will definitely present legal and procedural absurdity to the ordinary process of evidence-taking as we know it. Honourable members, I indeed found myself in a very awkward position that requires me to adjudicate on the content of a report whose conceptualization, evidence-taking, and drafting I did not participate in. In summary, therefore, I rule as follows. 1, that pursuant to provision Standing Order number 199, the report before this House is authentic and it meets the requirements of the standing orders. And 2, that pursuant to the provisions of that same standing order, the members of the Joint Committee who may have a dissenting opinion from the majority of members who adopted the report ought to have considered recording as part of the report their dissenting views. But in absence of such record in the report, the House should proceed to consider the report as tabled and ignore those purported minority views. The House is therefore accordingly guided. I thank you. Move on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. This is a much-awaited report on the sugar. And Honorable Speaker, I begin by calling on colleagues to agree with the committee and adopt the recommendation and findings contained in this report. The report was tabled, Mr. Speaker, last week, and members had ample time to read and reflect on the issues. Mr. Speaker, I want to just take down members down the memory lane to know exactly where we came from. Mr. Speaker, on 13th June 2018, the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, made a public pronouncement while at the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, alleging that sugar in the country was laced with mercury, which triggered a national debate, leading to a public outcry. Mr. Speaker, as a result of the public announcement, the Honorable Naisula Lesuda, the MP for Sabul West constituency, on Tuesday 19th June 2018, requested for a statement from the Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Trade, Industry and Cooperatives regarding the contraband sugar seized in most parts of the country. And pursuant to Standing Order 44-2C, the Speaker invited members to comment on the issues raised in the statement where the matter was actually deliberated. I remember, Mr. Speaker, the first person to speak on this matter was the Majority Leader, who offered very important information and gave us a list of companies that imported sugar and also where the go down was. Mr. Speaker, you subsequently directed that the matter be dealt with by the Departmental Committee on Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, Agriculture and Livestock, and report back to the House within a period of 10 days. The 10 days were extended, Mr. Speaker, 3 times. It is now 1.5 months. Mr. Speaker, which is also very, very important, the House also can remember that those who are with us in the 11th Parliament, a similar inquiry, Mr. Speaker, was adopted in this House, Mr. Speaker, and it was titled, "The Crisis Facing the Sugar Industry." Mr. Speaker, this House does not act in vain, and this is a document that was actually adopted by the House, and it's part of the information that we have even in Parliament. The sugar crisis, they took 1.5 years to come up with this document. For us, we took 1.5 months to come up with the document that we are sharing today. Mr. Speaker, the committee was guided by the following terms of reference in responding to issues raised in the statement. 1, measures in place to ensure that the sugar in the market was safe for human consumption. 2, the sources of contraband sugar and the entities responsible for importing the sugar, mechanism for disposal of contaminated sugar, measures in place to guarantee the safety and fitness of food in the market, and 4, the circumstances under which the said contraband sugar was acquired, Kenya Bureau of Standard stickers. Mr. Speaker, to just appraise the members, because it's also very, very important that we know what the request for statement was all about. And I want to read verbatimly what Honorable Lesuda asked. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 44-2, I wish to request for a statement from the Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Trade, Industry and Cooperatives regarding contraband sugar recently seized in most parts of the country. Mr. Speaker, I also took time myself to understand what the term contraband means. Contraband means imported goods that have been imported illegally, smuggled, or secretly into the country. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Lesuda also put it that is alleged that the sugar is unfit for human consumption as it contains mercury and copper and are believed to have adverse effect on human health. It is no wonder that even the rising cases of cancer were attributed to this. Mr. Speaker, the request was, Mr. Speaker, the leader of majority is not listening. Mr. Speaker, it is against this background that I seek, that she sought from the chairs as the source of this sugar, how it was cleared at the point of entry, because these are the terms of reference, who is the importer, where the sugar was inspected prior to consumption, how the packaging of contraband sugar acquired Kenya Bureau of Standards. Mr. Speaker, we went through all this, and Mr. Speaker, the committee began the sittings on 22nd June 2018 by developing its operational guidelines, timetable, and schedules of activities. The committee held 26 sittings in which we received information from the following institutions. Mr. Speaker, we got information from the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries, and Irrigation, also AFA, the Ministry of National Treasury and Planning, the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government, the Ministry of Health. We also received submissions from the Diamond Wholesalers, SGS, Rai Group, representing West Kenya, Sukali, Menengai, Hydre P Limited, Kenya Revenue Authority, the Kenya Bureau of Standards, Council of Governors, Sony, among so many other people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to give a synopsis of the events that led to what happened last year. Mr. Speaker, the country experienced severe drought and famine in the period 2016-2017, as a result of which the prices of basic commodities escalated beyond the reach of many Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, to remedy the escalation of prices of basic commodities and other effects of the drought, His Excellency the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces declared drought and famine a national disaster through Executive Order Number 1 of 2017 on 10th February 2017, and invited government ministries, departments to initiate measures aimed at mitigating the effects of the drought and famine. Mr. Speaker, Kenya's sugarcane production remained low in the year 2016-2017 due to the severe drought and famine. The continued poor performance of the state-owned sugar milling plants caused by depressed sugar production by milling companies also contributed to the reduced production of sugar in the country. According to the statistics, Mr. Speaker, by the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries, the monthly sugar production was on a downward trend from 53,000 metric tons in January to 10,000 metric tons in August 2017, against a monthly demand of 60,000 metric tons. Mr. Speaker, as a result of this deficiency, the Food Security Committee meeting held at Harambee House on 5th May 2017 and 21st June 2017, at which prevailing maize shortage, high prices of sugar and milk in the market were reviewed. Mr. Speaker, the meeting reviewed the supply of sugar and milk in the market and noted that their prices had escalated beyond the reach of many Kenyans. To ensure steady supply of the products at affordable prices, the meeting requested the National Treasury to gazette duty-free, free imports of sugar and milk for the purpose of lowering the prices. Mr. Speaker, Section 14.2 of East Africa Community Customs Management Act 2004 allows the importation of goods duty-free by a member state upon a phenomenon being declared a national disaster. On 12th May 2017, the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, issued a Gazette Notice number 4536, allowing the importation of sugar and powdered milk into the powdered milk duty-free from the world market to mitigate on the escalating prices of sugar and milk and guarantee availability, Mr. Speaker, to these commodities, to the public. This Gazette Notice was to remain in force up to 31st of August 2017. And to read verbatimly what the Gazette Notice actually said, it's also very clearly that sugar imported by any person will be duty-free. But when it came to milk, there were specifications that the milk, we had to import 9,000 metric tons of milk. Mr. Speaker, moving forward, Mr. Speaker, on the 4th of October 2017, the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, through another Gazette Notice 9801, extended the duty-free importation of sugar consigned to local millers up to 31st December 2017. Further, Mr. Speaker, upon assessment of available quantities of sugar in the market, the Ministry of Agriculture advised the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, to bring forward the lapse of the duty-free importation window since there was sufficient stock in the country. Consequently, the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, on 13th October 2017, through a Gazette Notice 10149, brought forward the expiry date of duty-free importation window from 31st December 2017 to 13th October 2017 through a Gazette Notice 9801. Mr. Speaker, a total of 800, and this is very important for members to note, that in total we imported 829,871 metric tons of brown sugar in the country in the year 2017. Mr. Speaker, further again, Mr. Speaker, on October 10th, 2017, following further analysis of sugar situation in the country, the Ministry of Agriculture advised that the sugar in the country was reasonably sufficient, and there was need to revoke the duty-free importation of sugar. Consequently, the CS Treasury moved to revoke the duty-free importation of sugar by amending Gazette Notice 9801 through Gazette Notice 10149 of 13 October to provide that the deadline of the importation should be 13 October 2017. Mr. Speaker, the committee noted that Gazette Notice 9802, and it is important for members to follow this, 9802, dated 29th September 2017, amended Gazette Notice 4536 of 12 May by deleting the word imported and substituting it, therefore, with the word loaded into a vessel destined to a port in Kenya. The effect of the amendments was that duty was not to be paid on sugar loaded into a vessel destined to a port in Kenya between 12th May and 30th November 2017. Mr. Speaker, annexed to the report is a list of companies that imported sugar duty-free, and honorable members, I invite you to check on the list. We have annexed a list of over 135 companies that imported sugar during that duty-free period, how much they imported, and whether they paid duty or not. Mr. Speaker, the committee went to lengths to inquire into the allegations of alleged importation of illegal sugar and contaminated sugar into the country and reported back to the House. Mr. Speaker, and that's the reason I have this report. The committee held 26 sittings under very strict timelines, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as you will recall, we called on your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, not once, but 3 times, to seek for extension so that we get substantial reports from the relevant government agencies. Unfortunately, in some cases, we were not able to get the correct information that we wanted because some agencies refused to come to us. Mr. Speaker, in your ruling on the conduct of members and the committee proceedings, you made clear the role of other agencies such as DCI, EACC, and other tasks with the solemn duty of carrying out investigations. Mr. Speaker, you know that the committee of the House relies on information provided by relevant government agencies, witnesses, members of the public. Mr. Speaker, we also did invite members of the public who participated in the report, the deliberations that we had. Mr. Speaker, we also had quite a number of challenges. Mr. Speaker, the teams like multi-agency team, the government chemists shied away from this committee. We invited them to come and shed more light on some of the reports that they had, but unfortunately, they didn't come. Mr. Speaker, this is very, very unfortunate because all Kenyans wanted to know, and all what Kenya wants to know is whether the sugar they have for their consumption is safe or not. And I want to assure the country that the market surveillance has shown that in 45 counties, there were no poison samples, no sugar, no mercury was detected in the 45 counties that were actually tested. Mr. Speaker, I want now to take the members direct to the observations, because the observations will actually inform the recommendations. Mr. Speaker, and I seek the indulgence of the members that I will pick on particular observations, but the members have all the observations. I want to start by the first observation, that the mandate of KEBS, among other, is testing of locally manufactured and imported commodities with a view to determine whether such commodities comply with provisions of Standard Act and any other relevant law which provide for standard of quality of or description of commodities. Mr. Speaker, and this is very, very important. 4.3 says, no traces of mercury were detected in the samples collected from seized sugar and from market surveillance by Kenya Bureau of Standards. Kenya Bureau of Standards tested 2 categories of sugar. The first category was samples were drawn from consignments seized by the multi-agency Task Force Annex number 14, while the second category were collected by KEBS by market surveillance team from various counties, for various outlets across the country. Annex 15. The only 2 counties that they were not able to undertake the test were Mandela and Tana River for logistical reasons. These market surveillance samples were collected from outlets mostly frequented by members of the public. Mr. Speaker, out of the samples of 1,266, that is 351 50 kg bags, 837 244 bags, equivalent to 66% of the total haul, failed the KEBS test. Only 157 392 of the samples passed, but out of the 800, 705,000 bags, amongst the ones that did not meet the standards, were meant for further processing. Mr. Speaker, to date, KEBS has drawn a sample of 261 from 45 counties, with the exception of Tana River, as I said, and Mandela, through market surveillance, routine checks, which establishes the quality of sugar in the market. KEBS has tested 108 samples, representing 42 counties, of which 75 samples complied with the standards, representing 68.81% of the total samples. 34%, Mr. Speaker, failed to meet the standards, representing 32% of the sample test for moisture, Mr. Speaker, moisture content, yeast, mold, color, total viable count, and polarization. Mr. Speaker, it's also very, very important to note that on 4.7, the samples collected by KEBS through market surveillance team were tested for the following heavy metals: mercury, arsenic, lead, copper. KEBS did not, and I want to underline that, KEBS did not find any non-conformity from the samples tested and analyzed, since lead or lead and copper were within the recommended threshold. Mr. Speaker, the samples collected from sugar seized at Diamond Wholesalers Go Down in Isli and Palea stores in Roiro were tested for the following heavy metals: mercury, arsenic, lead, and copper. KEBS detected heavy presence of copper at 20.7 from samples sugar seized at Diamond Wholesalers, against a maximum acceptable limit of 2.2 parts per million. And the levels of lead at 0.35 parts per million in samples collected from Palea stores, against the recommended limit of 0.05. Mr. Speaker, going to the Ministry of Health, where at that time government chemist was domiciled, the initial report from the government chemist, as submitted to the committee by the Ministry of Health on 22nd June 2018, indicated that from 174 samples collected from 19 counties, 60% of the samples tested and analyzed for moisture did not comply with the standards. The requirement standard is 0.2 and 0.5 maximum moisture content for brown sugar and light brown sugar. Mr. Speaker, the sugar is therefore the one that didn't meet the standards, is therefore not fit for human consumption. In respect to heavy metals, laboratory results analysis revealed that copper, lead, and arsenic contamination were within the standard specification for brown and light sugar. Industrial sugar, Mr. Speaker, was also tested and analyzed for conformity and with the standard specifications. The test showed that the industrial sugar was fit for use in preparation of food meant for human consumption. Mr. Speaker, is also very, very important, because this one is a highlight also. A subsequent report, and I want members to listen to this also, a subsequent report by the ministry. Mr. Speaker, the consultations are too high. Subsequent report submitted by the Ministry of Health indicated that one sample out of 5 samples collected from Moya Base, Isli, Nairobi, reference number F/MISC/267/17-18, tested positive for mercury at 0.01141 parts per million. Out of also 5 samples collected from Goma County, it was also reported that 1 sample tested positive for mercury at 0.591 parts per million, hence not fit for human consumption. And we have annexed all that. Mr. Speaker, our efforts, the committee effort to establish the ownership of the consignment was successful, and the contaminated sugar, it was said by the multi-agency team, is under seizure. Mr. Speaker, our efforts as Parliament to also validate the same was thwarted by denial by the ministry or the Ministry of Interior through the multi-agency team to deny access to our agencies. Mr. Speaker, also important to note that the government chemist was moved from the Ministry of Health. Honorable members, is also, Mr. Speaker, it's also important to note that the government chemist was moved from the Ministry of Health to the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government through Executive Order number 1, dated 5th June 2018. The CS did not corroborate his statement on presence of mercury in sugar, despite the government chemist being housed in his docket by the time he appeared before the committee. Mr. Speaker, I want also to bring to the attention, because these are also very, very important, that during the same period, 829,871 metric tons of sugar were imported against a deficit of 349,889 metric tons based on the local production of 367,118 metric tons, hence resulting to an over-importation of 454,760 metric tons. A total of 194 companies imported sugar during the duty-free period. And Mr. Speaker, I went with the committee, we went to all the lengths to get all the companies that imported sugar with all the directors. And we have the report with us, Mr. Speaker. The Gazette Notice number 4536 failed to give guidelines on quality and quantity and the type of sugar to be imported, whereas importation of milk powder was specified in paragraph B of the same Gazette Notice. The CS National Treasury opened an otherwise well-regulated sugar importation process, which was taken advantage of by other unscrupulous traders. This allowed importation of in the excess of 800,000 metric tons of sugar. Mr. Speaker, we also had an interaction with the Minister of Agriculture, because Agriculture is the one that gives, through AFA, gives the licenses. After the expiry of Gazette Notice 4536 on 31st August 2017, the CS National Treasury, following the advice, and it's also very important to note and members to follow, that it is following the advice of the CS Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries, published as a Gazette Notice 9801 on 4th October, which is annexed, extending the duty-free period to from 1st September to 31st December, destined in the Port of Kenya and consigned to a local sugar miller. The Gazette Notice 9801 also amended by Gazette Notice number 10149, published on 13th of October 2017, created, very important, created an avenue for tax evasion by sugar millers who imported sugar between 1st September 2017 and the 3rd October 2017. Because, Mr. Speaker, the Gazette Notice does not act or does not operate retrospectively. Gazette Notice 9802 amended Gazette Notice number 4536 to specify that only sugar loaded on vessel between 12 May 2017 and 31st August 2017 would qualify for importation on sugar on duty-free basis. The failure to specify whether the waiver of duty was applicable to sugar loaded on a vessel within the duty-free window or sugar imported, because there is a huge difference, imported within the duty-free window, was abused by unscrupulous traders. There was absolutely no justification as to why 14 companies were given preferential treatment during the clearance of imported sugar, and we have annexed the 14 companies. Mr. Speaker, I want now to go to the recommendations. But before we go to recommendations, Mr. Speaker, it's also good to note about the issue of handling of sugar and disposal. Mr. Speaker, the handling, offloading, bagging, storage, and the transportation of some of the sugar was done in contravention of set out in KES EA 749 from field visits conducted by the committees in Mombasa, in Nakuru, in Nairobi. It was evident that the sugar was stored in unhygienic conditions contrary to Section 127 of Public Health Act. Specific violation included transporting sugar in open tippers, which were also used to fairly other non-food products such as fertilizer, clinker, and other things. The sugar was also put in warehouses that were dusty together with other foreign elements. Mr. Speaker, according to the Cabinet Secretary for Interior and National Coordination, he said that 95% of the sugar was imported through Mombasa, but there was a 5% component of sugar that found itself through our porous border, and he clearly said it is through Mogadishu, and that sugar could not be ascertained. The fitness of that sugar could not be ascertained because it is considered to be contraband. Mr. Speaker, from the samples collected from 45 counties by KEBS and laboratory analysis by the government chemist, contamination of sugar was majorly on moisture, yeast, mold, total viable count, polarization. And then sugar suspected to be laced with mercury was detected in 2 areas, as I put it before that, but our efforts to validate the same were thwarted by the multi-agency. Efforts by the Joint Committee to validate the findings of the government chemist on the presence of mercury in the seized consignment of sugar by independent agencies, namely the University of Nairobi, the Kenya Plant and Health Inspectorate KEFIS, were unsuccessful and were denied entry to the 2 sites by the multi-agency. Mr. Speaker, I now move to the very important part, which is the recommendations. Recommendation number 1, all sugar that does not comply with the set standards and hence unfit for human consumption shall be destroyed by multi-agency task force or any other appropriate government agencies within 21 days of the adoption of the report of the Joint Committee on Agriculture, Livestock, Trade, and Cooperatives. 2, Mr. Speaker, the importers, wholesalers, millers dealing in contraband sugar should be investigated by relevant government agencies with a view to prosecute or prosecution for violation or violating the provisions of Section 3 of Food, Drug, and Chemical Substance Act Cap 254, Section 131 of the Public Health Act Cap 242, and any other relevant law. 3, Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Revenue Authority should recover duty payable on all sugar imported between 1st September and 3rd October 2017. The importers benefited as a result of retrospect application of the law via Gazette Notice number 9801. Mr. Speaker, 4, the Directorate of Criminal Investigation and Ethics and Anti-Corruption should investigate the irregular transaction between South Nyanza, popularly known as Sone, and all the other companies for alleged tax evasion, approximately to 2.5 billion Kenya shillings. Mr. Speaker, the 5th one, 5.5, the relevant government agency should investigate the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury to ascertain the circumstances under which the Gazette Notice number 4536, Gazette number 9801, Gazette number 9802, Gazette number 10149 were issued leading to importation of excess sugar into the country and evasion of taxes. 5.6, Mr. Speaker, the relevant investigative agencies should investigate the then Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries to establish the circumstances under which the CS recommended waiver on duty for the 14 companies which imported sugar under Gazette Notice number 9802. 7, Mr. Speaker, the Criminal Investigation and Ethics EACC Commission should conduct further in-depth investigation on all irregularities relating to the importation of the sugar in the country. 5.8, Mr. Speaker, the government should ban all unbagged bulk sugar and institute measures to guarantee the safety of sugar and other food commodities imported into the country. 5.9, the government should also ban the importation of raw sugar meant for further processing as table sugar to avoid diversion of this sugar into the local market and safeguard the local cane farmers. 5.10, KEBS should undertake a thorough review of its existing standards for sugar importation to provide that all sugar imported into the country is tested for presence of heavy metal prior to issuance of pre-verification of exports, certificates, and COCs from country of origin. Mr. Speaker, when we interacted with SGS, they said that ordinarily mercury is not found in sugar. So it is not actually tested when they are doing the COCs, but we have said that now it has to be tested, Mr. Speaker. 5.11, the relevant investigative agencies should investigate the then Cabinet Minister for Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, under whose docket KEBS falls, to establish the circumstances under which KEBS failed to undertake adequate market surveillance to guarantee the safety and quality of sugar into the country. 5.12, the government through the multi-agency team should speed up the investigation into the unfit and contraband sugar and publish its findings within 21 days of the adoption of this report of the Joint Committee on Trade, Industry and Cooperatives and that one of Agriculture. 5.13, the relevant agencies should ensure that all raw sugar imported into the country during the duty-free window is reprocessed in compliance with the said KEBS standards. 5.14, Mr. Speaker, the multi-agency task force should ensure that seized sugar that comply with the relevant test and set standards is released back to the owners immediately. Mr. Speaker, when the multi-agency team started the crackdown, sugar, a 50 kg bag of sugar was costing 3,500. At the moment, that same bag is going for 8,000 shillings. So we are telling them to release the sugar that is fit for human consumption so that we can also stabilize the prices. 5.51, the samples, Mr. Speaker, the samples collected from sugar seized at Diamond wholesalers go down in Isli and Palea stores in Roiro were tested for the following heavy metals: mercury, arsenic, lead, lead, and copper. KEBS detected heavy presence of copper at 20.7 parts per million from the samples of the sugar. The relevant government agencies to investigate the circumstances leading to the contamination of sugar and lead, of sugar with copper and lead. Finally, Mr. Speaker, in view of the findings submitted by the government chemist that 2 samples tested positive for mercury, that is Moya-based Isli reference FMISC/267 2017 at 0.11 parts per million, and West Webuye Bugoma reference FMISC 27/1720-18 at 0.591 parts per million, and the obstruction of the University of Nairobi and the Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service KEFIS to validate the same findings through independent testing. The relevant government agencies should immediately conduct further investigations on why the contracted institutions were denied access by the multi-agency task force to the consignment or lots of on 2 occasions, and B, the circumstances leading to contamination of sugar with mercury. Mr. Speaker, with that background, Mr. Speaker, with the challenges that we also went through, Mr. Speaker, I believe this is a good document. This is the best we would have done, Mr. Speaker, and I beseech members to adopt this report as it is, Mr. Speaker, because it identifies all the areas that we were asked to actually focus on, whether the sugar is safe, who avoided taxes, who imported sugar, and Mr. Speaker, we have dwelt on those many issues. Finally, Mr. Speaker, moving forward, I would want to thank my committee members, the 38 members, all of them, for their dedication. Most of them were there when we were going for field trips. They were there. We did 3 report writings, which has never been done here before by any parliament. We did this report within 1.5 months, Mr. Speaker. And the best thing for this team, this House to do is to agree with the report that this team has provided. And on that note, I want to call upon my friend and my brother, the MP for Navaholo, to second this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. That is Honorable Wangwe. Something wrong with your mic? Is it infected by something? You may be.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to second the report as tabled and put forward by the mover. Honorable Speaker, first and foremost, allow me to begin with the genesis of the whole issue, Honorable Speaker. As the mover said, it is all about the drought that was there in the 2016-2017 that was realized, Honorable Speaker, that made the President to give the executive order requiring that the government brings down the prices of sugar, milk, and maize in the country. Notwithstanding that, Honorable Speaker, allow me to help the members, Honorable Speaker, to understand the whole document as it is. Honorable Speaker, in the document, we have itemized the list of the very many importers that participated in the Gazette Notices number 4536, notice number 9801, notice number 9802, and 10149, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, this notice, especially 4536, generated that anybody who was capable to import into the country, Honorable Speaker, was able to import sugar, notwithstanding any other condition. It led to the importation of sugar to a tune of 829,000 metric tons using 135 importers, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, allow me also to shed more light to the members for the report that we have annexed in the report, Honorable Speaker, 24 annexures, with which I would request my colleagues to really look at them and see what the annexures reveal in terms of what we have reported to the House, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I would also want to shed more light to the members that we look at the effects of the entire importation. For instance, what does the importation entail, Honorable Speaker? By bringing in a total of 829,000 metric tons against the advised quantity of 130,000 metric tons, Honorable Speaker, led to what we saw in Mombasa. You can see, Honorable Speaker, that the capacity of our importers to handle that difference is not there. You could witness, Honorable Speaker, that most of the sugar was laid on the bare floor. Most of the sugar, Honorable Speaker, the handling in KPA was not capable to do the same. And at the same time, Honorable Speaker, the transportation of the same sugar was not done in a safety environment, Honorable Speaker, to now a food item. Honorable Speaker, the importation also led to the tax evasion. You can see, Honorable Speaker, through the Sony transaction and any other transaction that would be identified in the investigation, Honorable Speaker, thereto, leading to the tax evasion the 14 companies that have been mentioned should also be an issue to look at as a consequence of over-importation. Honorable Speaker, importation in that quantity is as good as dumping, Honorable Speaker. What the definition of dumping, Honorable Speaker, is anything in excess of what you can consume and what is not viable in its quality, Honorable Speaker. We witnessed that the sugar we got was not per se, after being delivered, good enough in terms of quality. That in itself, Honorable Speaker, without really looking at it beyond any other condition, that's as good as dumping, Honorable Speaker. And in it, we should have to look at it in the recommendations, Honorable Speaker. Speaker, we look at the issue that the import contributed to in terms of the pressure to the local farmers. What does it mean when we see an importer bringing in raw sugar? What does it look like when we are talking of somebody or a miller bringing in raw sugar instead of buying cane from our farmers? The effect is we are now going to subject our farmers to competition with external people who are now doing large-scale production like those ones in Brazil and the rest of the world. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, that pressure itself kills the market of our farmers to reach the market in terms of the millers. Honorable Speaker, we look at the roles of the institutions. In the report, we've itemized the KPS, KPA, Port Health, and Kenya Revenue Authority. The role of the various agencies in terms of importation, where it was supposed to act and how it acted, Honorable Speaker, it is well itemized. And I would call upon my colleagues to read the report in full so that you can see. For example, where an importer wrote a letter to Kenya Bureau of Standard, there was communication to that effect, and Kenya Bureau of Standard could not enforce the difference between one product and another. For example, the importation of raw sugar in bulk, the importation of table sugar in bulk, being given two different letters of assignment. Honorable Speaker, that is something which is annexed and which members need to look at and see what happens. Where did the agencies fail? We have also itemized them. Honorable Speaker, I want to call upon my colleagues to look at the observations in the report from page 52 to 59. That details the real observations as we saw in the report for the last 1 month. The recommendations of the report on page 60, Honorable Speaker, details what the committee in its wisdom thinks the report it's supposed to look like, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I would want to single out an observation of one company, Sony Sugar, where the documentation, Honorable Speaker, with the naked eyes was depicting some forgery. All the details that they were sending to us could not really determine that was an import in itself totality, Honorable Speaker. We would want to look at the 14 companies which evaded tax to a tune of 10.6 billion. The Sony Sugar, it was 2.5 billion. Yet, Honorable Speaker, the taxman is looking for money and resources, Honorable Speaker, to help the country to meet its expenditure. Honorable Speaker, with that, with that observation and recommendations, Honorable Speaker, I beg to second. Thank you.
Honourable members, I will propose a question, but thereafter there's a request by the Honourable T.J. Kajwang, understanding order number 97. You can look at it, or indeed look at the order paper. You will see what is trying to seek to address. What appears as page 897. I propose a question, which is that this House adopts a report of the joint sittings of the departmental committees on agriculture and livestock and trade, industry and cooperatives on the inquiry into alleged importation of illegal and contraband sugar into the country laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, August 1st, 2018. Honorable Kajwang.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise under Standing Order 97 that notwithstanding the resolution of the House of Wednesday, February 14th, 2018, that the time be limited for every speaker speaking for 5 minutes. Mr. Speaker, sir, 3 minutes. 5 minutes? 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker, sir. 5 minutes for every member presenting. Mr. Speaker, sir, you can see that the House is full, and you can see the exuberance and the robustness with which members want to contribute to this sugar. It is not because of the mercury in their body, Mr. Speaker, sir, but it could well be the lead or the copper. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I urge that the House do agree with me that then we have resolution to limit time to 5 minutes per speaker.
Honourable members, the proposal by the Honourable TJ Kajwang is that debate be limited to 5 minutes. 5 minutes. But you see, in keeping with your rules, you must make that decision. That, notwithstanding the resolution of the House on 14th of February this year, debate on the motion now before the House be limited to 5 minutes to every member speaking. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Aye. As those of the contrary opinion say no. The ayes have it. Thereafter, honourable members, order. Honourable members, for the orderly conduct of business. Again, I propose, before debate commences, to dispose of the proposed amendments so that you are either debating the motion as amended or not amended. So I call on the Honourable Gladys Wanga. Move your amendments and be brief.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the following amendments. Mr. Speaker, do I move all of them?
You have only 5 minutes, so as per the order paper, everybody has asked them on the order paper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the guidance. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this report be amended as per the order paper. Mr. Speaker, the first amendment I am proposing is to the section 5.5 of the report on page 60. Mr. Speaker, the current recommendation reads that the relevant investigative agencies should investigate the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury to ascertain the circumstances under which Gazette notices as listed there were issued leading to importation of excess sugar. Mr. Speaker, the intention of my amendment is to tighten this further. Mr. Speaker, and the basis of that amendment is the observation within the report on page 55 and 56, which reads, observation number 4.20. The Gazette Notice 4536 failed to give guidelines on the quantity and type of sugar that was to be imported, whereas importation of milk powder was specified in paragraph B of the same Gazette Notice. We specified milk, but we refused to specify sugar. The Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, opened up the otherwise well-regulated sugar importation process to abuse by any person. This allowed importation of 829,871 metric tons of sugar, when the deficit based on local production was 343,889. Hence, an over-importation of 453,760 metric tons of sugar. If this was not killing the sugar industry, then tell me what it was. And this is the reason I am saying there is nothing more to be investigated. The cabinet secretary should be held responsible. That is the gist of that amendment. I move to the next amendment. The next amendment has the same gist, but relates to the then cabinet secretary for agriculture, livestock, fisheries. Mr. Speaker, while the minister tried to advise, in a note that I have, while the minister tried to advise the cabinet secretary for national treasury on this matter in terms of limiting the amount of sugar and limiting the type of sugar and limiting who can import sugar, while he tried to do that, he later on, in a letter annexed to this report, Annex 11, wrote to the Cabinet Secretary Treasury demanding that 14 other companies be asked to import sugar. Mr. Speaker, finally, there are companies who imported sugar that were laced with mercury. These companies must be held to account, not just investigating the circumstances under which this mercury laced the sugar. We don't want the circumstances to be investigated. We want the companies to be held to account. Mr. Speaker, these include Diamond Wholesalers, Palea Stores, and others. Mr. Speaker, I'm also requesting in these amendments that the Minister for Health and the relevant government bodies do a sampling of all sugar across the country so that they tell us really, is the sugar on the shelf safe or is it not safe? Want to call for a seconder?
Oh, no, members, be looking at the light here. When it is yellow, it means you have a balance of 1 minute. When it turns red, 30 seconds, so that you organize yourself accordingly.
Mr. Speaker, but I call upon, I beg to move these amendments and call upon the Honorable Benjamin Washiali to second.
Honorable Washiali.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'll be very brief and quickly request members in this House to understand that there is diversity in this House. Mr. Speaker, we have members who represent the sugarcane farmers like us.
There's a
Today,
point of
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Kimunya.
Mr. Speaker, we are discussing some very serious matters. And whatever this parliament does, it must be in accordance with the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, looking through the amendment that has just been moved and that is being seconded, it's very clear that it's attempting to take action on cabinet secretaries in a manner that is not in accordance with Article 152 of our Constitution. And Mr. Speaker, this House cannot discuss anything that goes against the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I would like to appeal to you to give us a ruling on whether this amendment goes against the spirit and the letter of Article 152 of our Constitution, so that we stop any further debate on a matter that is clearly unconstitutional.
Now, honorable members, you would recall recently, I allowed the Honorable Otiende Amolo to rise on a point of order to raise a constitutional matter. Your own rules state that a matter on constitutionality or otherwise of any business can be raised at any time. So please, because I know many of you have not looked at your own standing orders, You know, that, I mean, you are the ones who adopted those standing orders here in June last year. So, and they have always been like that. A matter today touching on constitutionality of any business before the House can be raised at any point. But nevertheless, I will allow the Honorable Washiali to finish what he's saying before I allow many more of you to raise that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing the permission. Mr. Speaker, quickly, I was saying that I want to request members of this House to sympathize with us, the members of Parliament who represent the sugarcane farmers. Today, as we speak, Mr. Speaker, farmers are doing literally nothing. Mr. Speaker, farmers have already delivered cane to the millers. They have not been paid. Farmers have cane in the farm that they are not even able to harvest, Mr. Speaker, because they cannot sell it to any miller, and even if they were to sell, they will sell it at a throwaway price. Mr. Speaker, we are talking of sugar importation, Mr. Speaker, and I don't know why he thinks that is relevant. It's again that produces sugar, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet Secretary, Treasury, was well advised in advance by his counterpart, Cabinet Secretary of Agriculture, then on what that Gazette notice is likely to do to sugarcane farmers. Mr. Speaker, if you allowed me to quote, the Cabinet Secretary, Willie Bett, on 18th of May, he wrote a letter in which, in part, it read, "Please also note that the sugarcane pricing mechanism links the price of sugar to the price of cane, and therefore unregulated importation of sugar will lead to collapse of sugar prices, resulting into drastic drop of cane prices, which will directly affect the 300,000 sugarcane farmers with their dependents." Mr. Speaker, honestly, with this kind of advice from the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Agriculture, the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Treasury should not have gone ahead to give notice to allow an open importation without regulations.
Yes, what's your point of order?
To sugar importers.
Honorable Ishongwa, what is your point of order? Honorable Washiali, you appear like you have, unfortunately, your proposed motion, which I rejected, is what you are prosecuting, not this amendment. You are giving evidence. It's a totally different thing. So please, second the proposed amendment. Don't tell us about evidence. Honorable Ishongwa.
Actually, Honorable Speaker, thank you, because you've actually captured what I wanted to bring to your attention. That indeed, Honorable Washiali is alluding to a letter that this House does not know whether, because it's not part of the annexures in the report, and therefore it must be something that Honorable Washiali is aware of, that the House is not able, the letter is reading, therefore the House does not know what he is reading. It is only him who has the purported letter from the other Cabinet Secretary to another Cabinet Secretary. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, I think he should be well guided to prosecute his secondment, not to adduce new evidence that nobody else has.
Honorable Washiali, please be guided accordingly. In fact, I want you to dispose of this matter because I want Honorable Gladys Wanga to tell us what, when you say be held responsible personally, what do you mean? In light of the provisions of Article 152, Clause 6, are you alleging to violation of a law or a provision of this Constitution, either national or international law, or something gross misconduct? So which of these would you be dealing with? But just finish your contribution so that Honorable Wanga can respond to this.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, if you remember, Honorable Speaker, I was one of the friends of these two committees, and in the course of attending the business of these two committees, Honorable Speaker, this letter was brought on the floor, was adduced. Now, Honorable Speaker, I am surprised that this letter, which is actually advising the CS Treasury not to go ahead and open a Pandora box, to open up sugar importers so that everybody can bring in sugar, should be stopped. And with the advice of this letter, Mr. Speaker.
Is that letter part of the annexures? Is it one of the annexures?
I am wondering why we are bringing an amendment, Mr. Speaker, is because such an important letter, why would it have missed to have been part of the annexures of this report, Mr. Speaker?
Honorable Ashali, I know you have a lot of interest when the matters sugar are in the House, and that is perfect. But now, if it is what you are alleging is about a letter which is not part of the annexures, so what are we? Isn't that new evidence?
Mr. Speaker, I don't know how you want to handle this.
You have a letter.
Speaker. But the question we are
you may have been given a letter in your capacity as the majority whip. Then you should have tabled it yourself before the committee, because you are there either as a witness or as a friend.
Mr. Speaker, this letter was tabled during the committee proceedings. And what I'm wondering, Mr. Speaker,
but it is
and
not,
I think
it
it's
is not
important
there.
that you make a ruling specifically on this letter, because this letter is very, very important, Mr. Speaker. This letter is very, very important. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I wish to second.
Honourable members, I raised some questions with the Honourable Anga, the proposer of this motion. Honourable Anga, you have looked at the grounds for removal. Now, when you say be held responsible, what do you really mean?
What I mean, Mr. Speaker, is to be held to account as per Article 153 of the Constitution, which speaks to the decisions, responsibility, and accountability of Cabinet and Cabinet Secretaries, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Cabinet Secretaries are accountable individually and collectively to the President for the exercise of their powers and performance of their functions. What I am calling on is they must account on this matter to the person who is the appointing authority. Mr. Speaker, yesterday you guided us accordingly on the floor of this House, that as a House, Mr. Speaker, you know, Mr. Speaker, what I would like, Pukose will not intimidate me, because I'm now a ranking member. Mr. Speaker, yeah, I'm ranking.
Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, you guided us accordingly on the floor of this House yesterday, that as a House, we make recommendations. Then it falls upon the appointing authority to now take whatever action that they require based on the recommendations of this Parliament. And that is exactly what I have gone ahead and done, made a recommendation for the action accordingly of the appointing authority, who is the President of the Republic of Kenya. Asante, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, of course, this one from Budalangi. Now, honourable members, as you are all aware, since this report came, many of you have gone through it. But you know, you are proposing amendments about every cabinet secretary. But from the proceedings of before the committee, there is no evidence that, like, for instance, the former cabinet secretary for agriculture was ever given a chance to appear before this committee. That would be a serious omission of a person's right. Now you have put him together with the rest. Be held responsible. Be held responsible. Anyhow, honourable members, on the question raised by the Honourable Kimunya, I find the proposed amendment admissible. Yeah. And I therefore propose a question that the report of the committee be amended as proposed by the Honorable Wanga as per the order paper. Honorable John Bandi.
No. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It is.
Mr. Speaker, I have the floor protected.
It's not a shouting match.
Mr. Speaker, I can see members are agitated. They want you to put the question. But I think we need to understand that when we are making a decision of this magnitude, it's important that we engage ourselves and our minds to what is being proposed. Mr. Speaker, I've been agonizing a lot with this amendment. And I was weighing between political expediency vis-a-vis my role as a member of parliament and as a senior member experienced in this house, who is supposed to help others to understand really the work of parliament. And I'm asking myself, what do I do? I've decided to sacrifice political expediency and do what I think is right. Mr. Speaker, and I want the members to listen to me. The proposed amendment is for us to hold 3 cabinet secretaries, 1 former, 2 current, to personal liability. Mr. Speaker, also bringing to accountability the millers or the traders or the wholesalers. I agree partly with this amendment insofar as the millers, the traders, and the wholesalers are concerned, because I was actually asking, why is it that the committee did not definitely record the names of the millers who have imported these questionable products to the market? But I want to speak, Mr. Speaker, if you allow me, I'll just take 2 minutes. I want to speak to the responsibility. First, Mr. Speaker, you've taken words from my mouth on Willibet. I have looked at this report, and the precedence in this house is before you cite someone and hold any person personally liable, that person must be given an opportunity to appear before the committee. And Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at this report, I'm not seeing anywhere where Willibet as a person appeared before the committee. If there is, let the committee tell me. The person who appeared is Mwangi Kiunjuri, who is the current cabinet secretary. You cannot, under the law of natural justice, hold someone accountable personally without giving that person an opportunity. I would want to be a cabinet secretary. I cannot be held accountable if you don't give me an opportunity to defend myself. So, Mr. Speaker, the committee must demonstrate to us that Willibet was given an opportunity to defend himself. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, and that is the last contribution I'm making, because as I told you, I agonized. There is a lot of rumors also in the room. And I was asking myself, Mr. Speaker, whether when I make this contribution, immediately I leave here, I will not be accused as one of the people who probably has benefited from these rumors. But Mr. Speaker, let me say one thing. The person who, the mover of the motion, Honorable Gladys Wanga, who is my MP, because she's my woman rep, wants Rotich. Is a woman rep of my constituency, my county. She is a woman rep. You know, sometimes we have a problem with English. It's not a women rep. As far as I'm concerned, it's a woman rep. It doesn't represent just women. It represents even myself. So, but she's my MP. Mr. Speaker, Henry Rotich, I have had issues with him in terms of performance. But on this one, what are we being asked that he did wrong? we are being told, listen, I want to explain. You'll have to listen. Mr. Speaker, protect me because I want to just, Mr. Speaker.
Order, members.
Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what Henry Rotich did,
now,
which was wrong.
Members, order, members. The Honorable John Bandy will be heard.
Mr. Speaker, I'll be heard. What Henry Rotich did, which is wrong, according to the amendment, is that Rotich allowed importation.
Yeah, proceed. Yeah, proceed.
Allowed importation of excess sugar via Gazette notice number. Mr. Speaker, you see, if you want to help the House, please debate. This idea of shouting before I even mention what I want to say is wrong. And you cannot intimidate and blackmail me. I'm a senior member, I understand what I can say. So, Mr. Speaker, the Gazette notice number 4536 allowed everybody, anybody, to import sugar up to 31st August. Mr. Speaker, it is clear from this report that after the 31st of August, there was still shortage of sugar in the country. That is in this report. And I will read. Just listen, I read. Millers under the umbrella Kenya Millers Association reached out to CS for Agriculture and Livestock and the Directorate of AFA to discuss the need of restricting importation of sugar to only allow millers who had the capacity to ensuring quality sugar was sourced and imported. The response the millers got from the ministry was that their representative was that restricting permission to import sugar to millers would amount to discrimination against other traders. That is the report of this committee. What does that mean? That the Ministry of Agriculture insisted that the importation should be done by anybody. So it is not the decision of Rotich. And Mr. Speaker, I want to continue and say this as I sit down. Mr. Speaker, after the Gazette notice that is being talked about was lapsing on 31st of August. And after the lapsing of that Gazette notice, the ministry did assessment and found that there was still shortage of sugar in the country. Then you are telling us that that Gazette notice allowed excess sugar. Yet it ended, the Gazette notice referred to here ended on 31st of August. And still after that, the Ministry of Agriculture recommended that more sugar should be brought. So what are you telling us? That Rotich allowed excess importation. Tell me, those who are saying, if you have been given something to move it and convince me. I want to be convinced how this Gazette notice of 4536 allowed excess. Yet after the lapse of that Gazette, Kenya still did not have enough sugar, and the ministry advised that more should be brought. Mr. Speaker, let us be serious. If we want to play politics, we can play politics. But if we are saying what is in this report, Mr. Speaker, there is nothing in this report that one would use to implicate Rotich to take personal responsibility for Gazette Notice 4536. If you said generally, I would understand. But if you are specific to Gazette Notice 4536, which lapsed on 31st August 2017, after which the Ministry of Agriculture still went to the Ministry of Treasury, and asked for more importation. Mr. Speaker, we have to be serious. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, see, this is a debating chamber. So, those of you who have found it difficult to debate and have assumed that when you shout from where you are seated, you are now in the business of resolving issues of concern to Kenyans, obviously you are in the wrong person, in the wrong place. Now, so therefore, honourable members, I told you we need to first of all dispose of the amendments, because there's still another amendment proposed by the Honourable Osotsi, which I have approved and needs to be also canvassed. But we are not going to spend time you have heard what the proposed amendment is all about. So I will proceed right away to put the question so that we know whether we are debating the report as amended or we debate it without amendment. Therefore, honourable members, you better listen to the question. I put the question that the report be amended as proposed by the Honourable Wanga on the under paper. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the counter opinion say no? No. The nays have it. They don't have it. Honour members, honour members, honour members. You've checked? Honour members, honour members, honour members, honour members, honour members, honour members, honour members. Those of you who rose in your places claiming for a division, you did not raise the numbers. So relax. So proceed to the next. Honour members. Honour members. Yeah. The number is 30. Yeah, 30. Honour members, as I indicated earlier, we must dispose of the amendments. You have been counted. You were only 21. The requirement, understanding order number 72, close 2 is 30. So that matter is over. It's over. Honourable Osotsi, proceed with your proposed amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to move the amendment. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the amendments as per the order paper. Amendment number 517, that in view of the observation number 419 of the report regarding excess sugar in supply, within 21 days, the Interministerial Multi-Agency Task Force on Sugar undertakes a thorough and comprehensive audit of the sugar imported into the country between May 2017 and August 2018 to determine, 1, the excess quantities and qualities of sugar imported during the said period, and 2, the amount of excess sugar so imported against the projected demand. 518, that the Ministry of Agriculture, having conducted the audit specified in recommendation 517, immediately puts in place and enforces a temporary embargo ban on any further importation of sugar until any safe sugar found to be excess is consumed. 519, Mr. Speaker, that within 60 days, the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture submits a report to the National Assembly on the findings of the audit under recommendation 517 and a confirmation of the implementation of recommendation 518. 520, that in view of the submission of the Ministry of Agriculture as contained in the paragraph 218 and 219 of the report regarding the absence of regulations to streamline the sugar sector, within 30 days, the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture ensures that the said regulations are concluded and gazetted in accordance with the Statutory Instruments Act. And finally, 521, that the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture and the National Treasury ensures that any future importation of sugar that enjoys any duty benefit, including duty-free arrangement, is restricted to the following, to allowing direct importation only by 1, state corporation dealing with sugar, 2, any other company for which the government of Kenya has shareholding. Mr. Speaker, the gist of my amendment, first of all in 517, is to determine the exact amount of quantities of sugar in the market, because the report clearly indicates that there was an excess of 111 metric tons of sugar imported into the country. And the report has also suggested that there was contraband sugar imported into the country through our porous border points. It is important for us to determine the quantities, because the excess sugar on the market is definitely going to affect the loss of demands and supply, and effectively hurting a farmer because of reduced prices. Mr. Speaker, the recommendation number 520, it is important because the report refers to regulations which have been there in the Ministry of Agriculture for long without being gazetted. I think these regulations are important if we have to deal with the problems of the sugar industry. And it's important that this report should have also recommended that these regulations to be gazetted in the shortest time possible. And most importantly, Mr. Speaker, I think this report talks about commercial and safety issues, but it does not talk to the farmer who is suffering. And that is why we are saying, in the event we have a need to import sugar duty-free, the sugar millers, the public sugar millers, and the sugar millers where the government has shareholding, like Mumias, should be the only ones allowed. The Honorable Titus Kamala, Member of Parliament for Lurambi, to second. Thank you.
Honorable who?
Titus Kamala.
Very well.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to second the amendments brought by the Honorable Godfrey Osothy on this report. Mr. Speaker, I represent a constituency that is a sugar belt constituency, and personally I am a farmer and I farm sugarcane. I understand the problems that we are having in the sugar industry, and being in a hurry to pass the report without doing the necessary amendments will not be of any help to Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, I want to say here that we need a proper audit on the sugar, because if we think we can resolve the problems that are ailing the sugar industry, we need, number one, to know how much sugar do we have. Sugar that is contaminated, the contraband sugar, how much do we have it in the market, Mr. Speaker? Number one. Number two, in the report, what are we doing, or what is in the report that can help put an end to the mess that we are having, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, there should be a ban on the sugar, on the importation of sugar, a temporary ban, because you cannot control something that is ongoing. You have to stop.
Honourable members.
Mr.
I can see the member for Budalangi has already crossed over.
Mr. Speaker, I am a sugarcane farmer, Mr. Speaker, and I represent Lurambi, which is a sugarcane belt, and my senior Honorable Washeldi knows that this matter is very personal to us as members of Parliament who come from Western Kenya. Because, Mr. Speaker, as much as we are shouting here in the House, we have people in Western Kenya who cannot afford a meal. In our shouting, Mr. Speaker, Are we going to provide food for our people? There is poverty in my constituency. Parents cannot take their children to school because the sugar industry has collapsed as a result of illegal importation of sugar. And Mr. Speaker, we stand here with pain.
Are you seconding this proposed amendment, or you are talking generally about sugarcane growing?
Mr. Speaker, I am seconding the amendments by the Honorable Godfrey Osoti that we need the amendment. And Mr. Speaker, I'm saying there need to be a temporary ban on the continuity of illegal importation of sugar. There should be no more sugar imported into this country. Mr. Speaker, number two, we should know how much sugar is out there. Mr. Speaker, we are talking about mercury. How much mercury do we have out there? Therefore, Mr. Speaker, before they lynch me, I second.
Order members, order members. Order members. I thought when the mover was moving this report, he indicated that he did not talk about mercury, but the member seconding says that he wants to know how much mercury is around here. I don't know whether it is here or wherever it is. But honourable members, I propose a question that the report be amended as proposed by the Honourable Geoffrey Osotsi. Well, it seems like there's a mood in the House that I put the question. I put the question, which is that the report be amended as proposed by the Honourable Godfrey or John? Godfrey or Geoffrey Osotsi. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Aye. And those of a contrary opinion say no? No. The nays have it. So, honourable members, now, honourable members, having disposed of, honourable members, now, listen. You see, honourable members, you have a problem sitting. Honourable members, having disposed of the proposed amendments, we now go back to the report as moved and seconded by the Honourable Wangwe. So, and remember, you've already passed a motion moved by the Honourable TJ Kajuang that every member contributing will speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. I know there are several of you who might not even be able to spend 5 minutes. So you are still okay if you feel like you want to speak for 1 minute or have a second. Proceed. Leader majority, you want to contribute?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I am sure, Mr. Speaker, this afternoon, Kenyans have been waiting with a bated breath on the outcome of the report of the two committees. And Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the two committees have given us an opportunity through the report to debate on the issues concerning the inquiry into the alleged presence of the contaminated sugar in the country. Mr. Speaker, because it is 5 minutes, let me raise some very substantial questions that I am sure that Mr. Speaker, I really want to ask members. These are very, very important reports, and it's on live coverage. And I think all of us must live by the standing orders so that we listen to each other, and when given an opportunity, we also respect the rights of others. Mr. Speaker, the people of Nairobi in the streets and the great people of Garissa Township, who I represent in this House, Mr. Speaker, will ask a number of questions. And these are the questions, Mr. Speaker. If these questions are answered conclusively, and more so by this report, then in one way or the other, this House will make a decision. Is there contaminated sugar in the country? Does it have mercury or even any other metal in the sugar? Speaker, I'm only posing questions for me to put it in the answer. I don't want answers. If yes, what are the quantities of the metal present and are they harmful to human? Where is the contaminated sugar located? Where can it be found? In which godown or warehouse is the contaminated sugar stored? Is there excess sugar in the market, and how much? Who are the people that imported the contaminated sugar? Which companies imported the contaminated sugar? Which companies, name by name, did not pay duty and evaded taxation? We want to know the names, not 14 companies. What did the public officers, including ministers, what role did they play in the importation of sugar? And Mr. Speaker, I am sure Honorable Manzo is listening to me and Honorable Arati. This is a report which has already been debated outside there. And Mr. Speaker, Honorable Kimunya raised a fundamental matter. And he raised Article 152 of the Constitution. And Honorable Kimunya is a victim, is a living example of this House of a minister who has been impeached. For nothing on very flimsy grounds. Because in the 10th Parliament, Honorable Kimunya was perceived to be one of the most arrogant ministers. So because of that perception, he was impeached. So when he talks about responsibility, and Mr. Speaker, the Constitution is very clear on how you impeach a minister and you remove him from the office. Mr. Speaker, you gave a communication that the grounds for removal of a minister, of a CS, the threshold, Mr. Speaker, is so high that I am sure the only debate, the only impeachment process that went through this House was when Honorable Kaimenyi was being impeached, and he survived by only 11 votes. So, Mr. Speaker, the report before the House is a property of the 349 members. And, Mr. Speaker, nobody should take it offensive. From where I sit, I'm at all times ready to work and support the report of committees. But, Mr. Speaker, there's one thing I have learned. Never again are we going to form a joint committee. If this report was with the trade committee, I am sure the report could have been better. If this report was with the agriculture committee, it could have been better. But we have put together 38, I think, members. And, Mr. Speaker, sugar is like drugs. The people who deal in business of sugar are the same, but the people, I can't say they're the same, but it's a very emotive thing. It's a serious thing. That's why you see this afternoon the House is like whether all of us have consumed mercury or some drugs. People don't want to listen to the other. So, Mr. Speaker, let me pick like Minister Aden. Minister Aden is being indicted in this report for a function of a corporate entity called KEBS. Speaker, KEBS is a corporate entity that can sue and can be sued. And as we speak here, the CEO of KEBS is in court. He has been sacked and he's in court. So what are you telling us when you say Aden Mohammed must be held responsible? Two, Minister Rotich. Minister Rotich acted on an executive order from the president. Minister Rotich acted on a cabinet decision. Minister Rotich did not sit under a tree and formulated a gazette notice. He acted on an executive order given by the president. He acted on a cabinet approval. He acted on a situation analysis that the country was facing drought. So today you are telling Mr. Speaker, let us use our resources and time to go and dig into Rotich and bring a substantive motion to discuss the person Rotich under Article 158, I think 6. But Mr. Speaker, we should not indict ministers through the back door. This report is trying to impeach ministers through the back door. And Mr. Speaker, to finish, you have seen what is happening. When somebody is told to take a responsibility, the next thing the president will do, from tradition, he will tell him to step aside. Mr. Speaker, we must protect, as legislators, the public and state officers come from our constituencies. Everybody who works in the executive, in the judiciary, come from our... So, Mr. Speaker, it was wrong. And I think the other recommendations in this report are very good. That what has polluted the minds of many members is the inclusion of Rotich Bet. Bet never appeared. Mr. Speaker, this House has passed the Fair Administrative Law in the 11th Parliament. The Fair Administrative Law says any Kenyan cannot even be sacked without being given a fair hearing. Did you give former Minister Bet the hearing? Did you even interrogate Rotich and say, was this a cabinet decision? Was this an executive order from the president? Why should Aden Mohammed, Minister for Trade, take the bullet for a corporate entity that can be sued and that can sue? So, Mr. Speaker, I think, in my honest opinion, I stand here, and Mr. Speaker, you know, I was in a function with the president, and I told the president, if I'm not here, they will tell me I have eaten and I have disappeared. So I had to leave the president and tell him, continue with your function, and let me come back. That's why I came back late. Mr. Speaker, I oppose this report.
Honourable members, you know, now we are back to the reports. And you know the president's in speaking in the House. I'm not about to break that, that protocol. So I'll give the leader of the minority party, after which, as a matter of priority, the Honorable Lesuda, who stood here and read out a statement that that was referred to the joint committees. So I think, honourable members, that must be. After that, now we will go there. And for information of members, those of you who have so far requested to speak are 67. So you can see, I can see, as Honourable Duale says, the matter of sugar are very juicy and sweet. Honourable John Bandi.
Mr. Speaker, now I hope, because many of the members who are very agitated when I was contributing to the amendment have left. Many of them have left. Now at least I can have an opportunity I can be heard properly. Mr. Speaker, now I'm contributing to the main report. Mr. Speaker, I'm agonizing. I'm agonizing because chances are that as a House, we may throw the baby with the bathwater. But this is because the committee was given a responsibility. And in my view, and with all due respect to my friend Kanini Kega, who chaired this committee, and Kanini Kega is someone whose capability I know very well. But Mr. Speaker, I'm shocked that this report, important as it was, has a lot of gaps, Mr. Speaker. That is my main concern. Why was it necessary for the joint committee to carry out this investigation? It was because on 13th of June, 2018, the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, made a public pronouncement while at the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, alleging that sugar in the country was laced with mercury, which triggered a national debate leading to a public outcry. Mr. Speaker, I remember when Honorable Lesuda brought this matter to the House, we were so passionate and asking whether the sugar that we take in this country has mercury or no mercury. Mr. Speaker, the effect of that statement and what we expected this committee to help this country solve is what could even bring the economy of this country down. Because, Mr. Speaker, we use sugar even to make soda in this country. And the soda that is made in this country is sold in neighboring countries. Mr. Speaker, you are in a sense, if you are saying that our sugar has mercury or is poisonous, you are in effect telling even those who are importing processed goods made of sugar from this country that they should be careful. In fact, this thing could even result in some travel warning to this country. by other international countries. Because if you are going to a country which is not even sure of the food that they take, it's a very dangerous thing. Mr. Speaker, I therefore expected that an explanation is offered to the people of Kenya whether the sugar we consume is having mercury or not. But that answer is not properly given. I know it has been glossed over that there was sugar found in Isili, and there was another one found in Bungoma that has some traces of mercury. But is it significant enough to say that this country has sugar laced with mercury? Mr. Speaker, those members who are coming from sugar growing areas are the ones who should even be very worried with this report. They should be more worried. In fact, I wonder whether they are fighting for those sugarcane farmers they are claiming they're fighting. Because when you say that sugar in this country could be having mercury, no one will know which sugar is manufactured in Sony or which one is imported. And therefore, you are killing the very industry you think you are supporting. So, Mr. Speaker, let us be sober enough. The question I want to raise, which the committee has not addressed properly. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at the observation by committees. And it is clear to me that this committee failed substantially to nail the sugar importers who have imported. If there is any sugar that is contraband in this country, we expected explicit names of those companies, those traders, those wholesalers, the directors who have imported sugar that is considered contraband in this country. I know the chair, Mr. Speaker, let him not even, will talk about annex. And that annex, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the recommendation, the committee has said the following: that the importers, wholesalers, and millers dealing in contaminated sugar should be investigated by the relevant government agencies with a view to prosecution for violation of the provisions of Section 3, blah, 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 up to the end. There is no mention of the list where those particular traders, wholesalers, importers are listed. If it is there, why haven't you mentioned it in the committee recommendation? If it is there, I have not seen it. If it is somewhere in your archives or annex, how do you expect this House to know? And by the way, why did you hide it if it is there? You are hiding it for what? So, Mr. Speaker, this committee needs to be serious. Mr. Speaker, there is this point that I raised. That's a now point of order. So you will respond to me when you will be. He has not been given. I'll proceed.
No, members, quite, because we say we reduce the speaking time. Let's not.
Let me just finish quick.
No. Proceed.
But the chair has opportunity to reply. So you will tell me if I was wrong. If you have that list, you will tell us where it is found. Mr. Speaker, let me go back quickly to this issue of the recommendations on investigation of the Cabinet Secretary. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Duale has repeated what I said on Willie Bet. If you wanted this former Cabinet Secretary to be investigated, you should have given him a chance to appear before you to defend himself. Mr. Speaker, I want to go back to Rotich again. And I mentioned that I have issues with Rotich. But on this one, you see, Rotich issued 3 Gazette notices. The Gazette notice, the first one issued the 4536, which issued in May. That Gazette notice was running up to August 31st. That is the Gazette notice that allowed anybody to bring sugar. But at the expiry of that Gazette notice, there was still sugar shortage, according to this report. And so you cannot blame Rotich for excess sugar based on that single Gazette notice. The other Gazette notices which were issued, Mr. Speaker, I've read this report. First, it was advised that there was still shortage of sugar. According to this report, I did not make this report, it is the committee. It was advised that there was still shortage. And that is why he varied the termination of the Gazette period to December. Later, it was again advised by the relevant ministry that now we have enough sugar. He did the right thing and reduced the period to October. So, Mr. Speaker, then what mistake did Rotich make? You know, I've been asking myself, if I want to sacrifice this Rotich, on what basis? If I was the cabinet secretary for finance, in charge of treasury, I am the one constitutionally and legally allowed to issue gazette notices. And I've been advised by the interministerial committee in charge of food that there is shortage of sugar. You are required to issue a gazette notice. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, it was not Rotich's responsibility to determine who was to bring sugar in this country. That responsibility is with the Kenya Sugar Board and the Ministry of Agriculture. And by the way, there was licensing. There is licensing procedure. If Rotich issued gazette notice and said that he is waiving the licensing procedure, then we would hold him accountable. But Rotich just said import sugar. It was now the duty of those authorities, AFA, to ensure that sugar that was being imported in this country is being imported by who, what quantity. That was supposed to form part of the licensing procedure. That is not the work of Rotich, as far as I'm concerned. And the issue of quality, that is with KEBS. But finally, Mr. Speaker, where I want to also agree with Duale, the leader of majority. Mr. Speaker, you are asking Aden, the cabinet secretary in charge of trade, then to be investigated for failure by KEBS to do surveillance. Markets, just listen to that. Just listen to that recommendation. In fact, I think I need to read it, Mr. Speaker, and just hear how ridiculous this recommendation is. Mr. Speaker, it says, sorry, it's taking my time, that the relevant investigative agencies should investigate the then Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Trade and Industry and Cooperatives, under whose docket KEBS fall, to establish the circumstances under which KEBS failed to undertake adequate market surveillance to guarantee safety. And in this report, there is no officer of KEBS, even one. And KEBS has a responsibility to monitor quality. And not even the MD of KEBS has been indicted. But you are indicting a minister to do surveillance. Honestly, you could have asked the minister to take political responsibility, but the person to be investigated. Now, if I'm the investigative officer, Mr. Speaker, that is my last word. If today I'm the investigative officer, and you tell me to investigate Adan why there was no surveillance, what am I going to investigate? What am I going to investigate? Because he's not the one with the technical capacity to do surveillance. So what are you investigating?
Oh, no, members, I don't know. You see, I said, oh, no, members, I said what is going to happen. So I don't see the need for you to raise up your hand, because there's no chance. The next chance is to the Honorable Lesuda, who raised the statement. You know, many of you from the sugarcane growing areas did not even raise the issue. So allow the person who raised the issue to contribute. Then I will come to sugarcane growing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this very important report that has been tabled before this House. And from the onset, Mr. Speaker, I just want to make 2 points very clear. And I'll even read from what the committee, from its findings, answered the questions from the questions that they've stated here. And the question number 1 is to establish whether the sugar imported during the 2017 duty-free window was fit for human consumption. Mr. Speaker, on that issue first, in my own statement, I was not even specific on when. My question was based on what the Cabinet Secretary, CS of Interior, Matiang'i, said in public, in full glare of the public, that there is mercury in our sugar. And that was my most important concern, whether the sugar that we are taking is fit for human consumption, Mr. Speaker. It goes further to say to establish measures in place to ensure that the sugar in the market is safe for human consumption, to inquire whether there is contraband sugar in the market and measures taken regarding the same, to establish if the required procedures were followed in the importation of sugar under the 2017 duty-free window. I didn't ask that. And the disposal mechanism for the unfit sugar and contraband goods, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
No, honourable members, I don't know, it is so important that we listen to what the Honourable Lesuda is saying, because she has first of all clarified that she never asked about 2017. So that
yes.
I'll give you sufficient time, Honourable Lesuda, because it's so important. Because she is saying in her question, she did not ask, she did not make reference to 2017, which then would suggest that the committee asked itself that question and then gave an answer. So proceed.
I will then proceed, Mr. Speaker, to the issues, which I think why we're getting all this confusion and even the recommendations of further amendments, Mr. Speaker, is because some answers are not very, direct. One says that no traces of mercury were detected. And actually, this is good for all of us, even as a country. I would be very happy to know that we have no mercury in our sugar. It is good for us, for our health, for our trade, for everything, for us as a country. It is there in the report. It says that. And it is actually done in bold. But then, Mr. Speaker, in the recommendations, we go further to say the samples collected from sugar, which was found in Diamond Wholesalers Go Down in Isili and Perla stores in Ruiru, which were tested by KEBS, actually have mercury, lead, copper, all manner of metals. So we've said there is no mercury, but then there is mercury in some of it. But even what is more of concern to human consumption is this one that is said to have been found at Moi Air Base, Isili, Mr. Speaker. And this is what was used by the CS. This is what Matiang'i used to say that the sugar is not fit for human consumption. Then, but it was in public glare, and even where he spoke from. And he says, then you go ahead and say that the committee was not allowed. It was not, it is the committee, it says, and the obstruction of University of Nairobi and the Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service to validate the same finding through independent testing agencies. Then we come back and tell this House that it is not, it could not find out whether that sugar that is there has mercury or not, Mr. Speaker. Why was the government chemist not indicted in this report? How can they refuse an independent body, which the committee, which is this parliament, has asked to go? No, what it has not indicted, it has only said to find out the institutions were denied access by the multi-agency task force, the circumstances leading to the contamination of sugar with mercury. So again, we have said it has mercury, while it, Mr. Speaker, we need a definite answer on the issue of mercury, whether it is there or not, Mr. Speaker. And also for companies. Others, we have called their names as Diamond Trust. Others, we are saying Inwebuye. Which one are these ones which are Inwebuye, Mr. Speaker? We have to be very clear, because I asked for a list. Some have been mentioned and some have not been mentioned, Mr. Speaker. We know, as you had said, the issue of sugar has very many interests, Mr. Speaker, but and all of them can conflict in one report, Mr. Speaker, when you really try to look at it. So my question, and I hope during the mover will be replying, is the sugar that we are consuming fit for human consumption, Mr. Speaker? I oppose.
Member for Mumias West. member for Mumias West. He has gone to bed. Honorable Johnson Naika.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this report. You know, this habit of people walking out when there's an issue and going to press outside does not help our people on the ground. What we need is to articulate matters that will help Mumias Sugar, Chemelil, and Muhoroni, and other factories that are now on their knees. Mr. Speaker, as I rise to support this report, I want to fault the government, and I want them to acknowledge that they made a mistake by importing 829,871 instead of the stipulated tonnage that they were allowed. They imported extra, over 400,000 metric tons. They did not pay tax on it. No tax was paid. Mr. Speaker, calculating that amount, that money is enough to run Kakamega County for 1 full year. I therefore plead with the government that they must collect these taxes from whoever has this sugar. Mr. Speaker, my main interest here is that the government is undertaking to finance the ailing sugar industries. Mumias Sugar is supposed to get 12 billion Kenya shillings to be on their feet again. Muhoroni, if you pass near Muhoroni, it is just an idle thing, it is dead, just like Mumias. And I'm sure the same thing with the Chemelil. We want to ask the government to put in the budget, even if it means extra, that these factories must be on their need. There is no country in the world which does not have sugar factories. Why do we want to depend on importing sugar all the time? And yet we have over 11 factories. If we kill them, we have killed even employment. Mumias Sugar has been having over 8,000 employees. Now it does not even have 150. This is not fair, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to appeal that the government be serious with agriculture. If one of the 4 pillars is agriculture and they are not taking the factories, the Mumias Sugar, Chemelil, and other factories seriously, then I think their aim is not right. You cannot build houses, 500,000 houses, for people who are eating nothing, who are on empty stomach. It is better to divert the money from the 500,000 houses to the milling factories, so that it is better we sleep even outside, but we eat. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to support this. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, I want to request that Mumias Sugar, as it is among other factories, if it revives, the economy of this country will also improve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, I want to now, because I will strictly apply the rules of relevance. You know, the question raised by the Honourable Lesuda is about the safety of the sugar in the market.
We don't have any sugar in Mumias, so whether it is safe...
Sit down. You see, Honourable members, Honourable Naika, next time you do that, you'll be out, and you live to regret. Honourable members, the question, and that's why we wanted the Honourable Lesuda to restate our question, is the sugar in Kenya safe for human consumption. It is not about how to improve sugarcane farming, or even to say that you need to go and do a study and find out which cane grows faster or grows. That is not, please, let us be focused. Honorable Misra, member for Keses.
Thank you, Speaker, sir, for allowing me to talk. Today, it's a very serious matter in our country, as we are talking about sugar, that just to please the barons who have money, is 45 million, 50 million people are of Kenya, Republic of Kenya, are at the cost of 11 or 14 corrupt mafias. Please kindly, as a doctor, as a human being, we should be human. We should not balance human life with mafia's money. Thank you very much. Number two, Excellency, your Speaker, sir, I will tell you that if we allow me, that minister of these three individuals whom we are naming, please, we should change the system, not human beings. They are our Kenyans. And waiving of any duty is not by decision of one individual minister, it's the whole cabinet. Either you sack cabinet or sack the government or never sack anybody. Number one. Number two, minister is not the policeman, minister is not the capes, so minister of treasury or agriculture is not responsible for any qualitative and quantitative assay of any product of this country. Number three, first we aim, then shoot. Don't shoot and then aim. So please kindly, before we getting table in the parliament about the report, how can you impeach the minister? We people don't were taken by few individual people who have their own interests. Thank you very much, Speaker, sir.
The honourable members, let's not go to matters which are not yet before the House, because I'm told that a few members are busy addressing the media about the same report they are supposed to be. So I wonder whether there is any need of us or me trying to indicate to the House. Very soon, I think we may have to amend our standing order so that we can deal with that level of indiscipline. Because that is being indisciplined. Honorable TJ Kajwang.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, this report is designed to fail. You read this report and you get an irresistible view that it was designed to fail by the people who wrote the report, not by the evidence that they had. Madam Lesuda has explained what she wanted. Kenyans are waiting for one question only. Is the sugar safe or not safe? No other question. When my Madare people drink sugar, and they drink a lot of it, by the way, are they going to die of cancer because of lead or mercury? This is the only question. These are the things that we are hearing, people are discussing here and there. It's because people, they designed their own terms of reference, they spoke to themselves and started writing reports. So it is not the people who appeared before them, it's not the witnesses. It is the people who wrote these things. Mr. Speaker, I think we should not waste a lot of time discussing things. It looks to me that we are being used here. Parliament is being used. We are trying to get evidence which are extraneous and bring to Parliament so that when people will be investigated as they should, then they will say on the doctrine of estoppel that these matters had already been canvassed in the National Assembly. that these things are now mute, that they can now not be investigated. This is what clever Kenyans know. We are not going to allow committee members to put us in a position where we are being used. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think we are taking time allowing people to go scot-free over a very important issue. The response that should have been here is that the sugar is safe or unsafe, or that the person who made this statement is a rumor monger. That is what we should have been told, that this fellow was talking about things that he doesn't know. But if the fellow was talking about things he knew, then we should just be told whether these things were there or not. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I think we still have an opportunity to remedy this. We cannot fail because the question of Madam has not been responded to. Just the fact that we have a shoddy report should not be the reason as to why we should end this debate here. My view is that we should take this report, we should take this issue, the statement of Madam, to Committee of Health, no point of order, Committee of Health, to investigate these issues. When they go to 45 counties, then they select only one Uchumi and one Tuskies and one shop there. And these things are all over. One county has 8 constituencies. How can you tell me by any data or mathematical precision that one supermarket can represent the whole county? It looks to me that we have mercury or lead in this country. We are sitting on a time bomb. Mr. Speaker, sir, if we don't do this, then we should bring WHO here. Because there's a big problem here. The shelves are giving us things that can make me start to stagger and say other things that I'm not used to be saying, Mr. Speaker. And you know that sugar is even used in beer. Sugar is used in confectionery, which even children partake of. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to take my 5 minutes. I only want to take those few minutes I've said and say that this report was designed to fail. Let it fail, but we are not going to stop there. Let us create a relevant department, a committee of health, which will look at these things professionally and design a matrix by which we are able to answer the question whether sugar is safe or not safe. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I oppose.
Member for Nakuru Town East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I arise to oppose this report. Mr. Speaker, first let me start with where TJ Kajwang has just left, Mr. Speaker. I think by virtue of the small misdeed of the joint committee, we should not allow this issue to just die. And I think, Mr. Speaker, we'll be asking you for a directive. Maybe assuming that this report goes down and it is not adopted, then what happens? Because, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying this because in Nakuru County, where this sugar was found, and it's very unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, some of those people acted, I don't know under whose instruction, and they took the same sugar that was supposed to be destroyed and took it to a dumping site, which was again collected by people, and they went with it again back home. Later, they went and pumped the same sugar again into our sewerage treatment works, again bringing a lot of issues at our sewerage. And I think it is important for us, as TJ Kajwang has said, if it fails, we need to have an ad hoc committee or a select committee that can be able to take up, and mostly maybe about you're talking about the health, committee on health, maybe a select committee that involves almost every other person, not only from the Committee of Health. So, Mr. Speaker, as I arise to oppose, Mr. Speaker, it is very unfortunate that the terms of reference that the committee itself gave itself, Mr. Speaker, they did not even adhere to the terms of reference that they themselves had indicated as indicated, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to read the terms of reference as indicated on page 10, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I listened to the chair of the committee. He should allow me to be able to give my views. Mr. Speaker, first and foremost is about the committee. If indeed it was serious in what it was doing, they ought to have understood, particularly what Naisuda was talking, Honorable Naisuda was talking about the mention of sugar in Eastleigh. Mr. Speaker, if in Eastleigh this sugar never came through the night channels, what did the committee talk about our porous borders where some of these sugars could be coming through? So it's important that the committee ought to have looked at our porous border where sugar could be coming, illegally. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, as it was mentioned by Honorable Aden Duale, it is important when you're saying somebody is culpable for you to exactly mention the infringements and which laws that they were culpable about. Because, Mr. Speaker, I want to believe that the CS Treasury could not have acted on its own. It could have been a cabinet meeting, and they sat and agreed. And after that, because it falls under his docket, then he went to write and do the letters that gave the waiver for the importation of sugar. Honorable Speaker, the mention of public health, and I think this is very important. As we were invited KEBS, we should also have, because under the Public Health Act, they also play a role in terms of the safety. And that was the gist of the statement which was moved by Honorable Naisuda. So again, the aspect of public health, they ought to have invited public health so that they could be able to give their verdicts. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, we are talking about sugar, which normally goes through some inspection, even from countries where it was coming from. Maybe even the committee ought to have done a little bit of, or even visit one country where this sugar was coming from, and maybe get some inspection reports that were coming, whether, so that we can be able to know, is it from the country or within the country that this thing. With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I oppose the report.
Member for South Mugirango.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. I equally rise to oppose this report. And Mr. Speaker, it's very important for us not to allow ourselves as members of parliament to be used, just like one of my colleagues mentioned here. And going by the report as we have it, Mr. Speaker, the vagueness it displays, right from the content all through to the recommendations, shows clearly that the committee did not understand the question that was raised earlier. Mr. Speaker, you will notice that the committee interviewed or questioned various ministers who gave all right-channeled answers. They questioned the Minister for Interior, the Minister for Interior. They questioned the Minister for Agriculture. All the other Gazette notices are extensions of 4536 that rose about out of a collective cabinet agreement. Mr. Speaker, it will be wrong for us to write a report and then recommend the opposite of what the report content has. The report does not seem to answer the question of the contamination of the sugar. The report does not seem to have the question, to answer the question on who should be held culpable individually. Mr. Speaker, it will actually be very shocking to notice that even the recommendation number 1, the recommendation 5.1, Mr. Speaker, is so ambiguous to read. You will notice that they are saying that all sugar that does not comply with the set standards. I mean, what were they finding out? How do you say all sugar? I mean, it's too open. They should have actually told us specifically that this type of sugar, with this number of kgs, this and this and this, has issues, and it should be contaminated. It should be declared unfit for human consumption. Not just saying generally that all sugar, which sugar? What were they investigating? Mr. Speaker, they equally say that Gazette notice that the CS Rotich should be investigated on Gazette notice number 9801. Then they go back and say that in their report, the Gazette notice 9801 came about out of a discussion or an advice from the CS of Agriculture. Then they confuse us. That came about out of an advice from the CS for Agriculture. Then they now want us to investigate, or they want authorities to investigate the CS for Agriculture on surveillance, not on the instructions he gave to the CS, not on the instructions he gave to the CS for Treasury. Mr. Speaker, in my opinion, this is witch hunt. This is nothing. This is actually witch hunt. And I think, Mr. Speaker, the committee ought to have done a good job, not jumping up and down, not allowing themselves used in any way by some political masters to have interest on the seats. We understand the handshake is real, but it should not be used to replace very competent government officials like CS Rotich and CS Adan. We shouldn't allow that. And on that note, Mr. Speaker, I oppose the report.
Honorable Kangogo Bowen.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to talk about this report. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I want to oppose this report. Mr. Speaker, as a House, we need to differentiate between the facts and the fictions. Mr. Speaker, we need to put aside the politics and the realities. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy you gave the Honorable Nahisula Lesuda to shed some light, especially because she was the originator of this, of the question which emanated actually to this report. Mr. Speaker, the question as to the sugar in the industry is safe for Kenyans is very important, Mr. Speaker. It is something which many Kenyans across our constituencies, they have been calling us to find out, is the sugar they are consuming as safe or not? Mr. Speaker, I saw the report and I have gone through the report, Mr. Speaker, and I took issue with the report 5.15, to which a committee, Mr. Speaker, cited a one only on-seller called Diamond, go down in Miss Lee. And they have indicated, Mr. Speaker, that the cabs detected heavy metals, Mr. Speaker, which is mercury. There is also copper, Mr. Speaker, and it is very serious, Mr. Speaker. That is just a sample, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, like somebody said, Mr. Speaker, I think it was a mistake to have a joint committee in this very important national issue, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the committee retreated for almost 3 weeks. They have wasted government money. They have wasted resources, Mr. Speaker, and they brought a report which they know, Mr. Speaker, is not going to pass through the test of this House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the government agencies, the AFA, the CAPS, even and the counterfeit agency, Mr. Speaker, are not mentioned in this report. Yet they are very clear, they have the functions, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the issue, especially on the culpability of the 3 cabinet secretaries, Mr. Speaker, I want to say this, Mr. Speaker. On February, Mr. Speaker, on February 2017, there was an executive order. That is an order from the President, Mr. Speaker, declaring the famine in the country as a national disaster. Mr. Speaker, on 5th May 2017, there was an interministerial meeting at Arambe House. Interministerial meeting in Arambe House, Mr. Speaker, where there were several ministers met and deliberated based on the Executive Order number 1 of 2017, dated February 2017. Mr. Speaker, there were not 3 cabinet secretaries. That interministerial committee, Mr. Speaker, it was not only about Rotich, Aden, and the former Minister for Agriculture, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this report is very malicious. Mr. Speaker, like those who spoke before me, Mr. Speaker, that we should not end here, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would suggest later, Mr. Speaker, we form an ad hoc committee. We form an ad hoc committee to look into this sugar issue afresh, Mr. Speaker. Or we put it to one committee, Mr. Speaker. Because it is very serious, Mr. Speaker. There is a recommendation, Mr. Speaker, from the committee that actually the University of Nairobi, they were denied to give samples. Mr. Speaker, that is very serious, and it raises even issue, Mr. Speaker. How the government chemist, which falls under the Ministry of Health, is now under the Ministry of Interior. It is a big issue, Mr. Speaker, of which we have to check. There must be a sinister motive. Well, Mr. Speaker, I oppose.
There's a point of order from the Honorable Pukose.
Mr. Speaker, I know everybody would want to contribute to this motion, but listening to the contributions from the members, let me say what I want. Listening to the contribution by the members, understanding Order 95, Mr. Speaker, I call that the mover be called to reply. I call that the mover be called to reply, understanding Order 95.
Very well. Well, honor members, what I'll do, I'll give one person this side and another one this side. Then please, but let me do this now. Honor members, all of you are coming here to whisper that you want to get a chance. You are disqualified. Yeah? So the moment you see somebody standing here, know that they are disqualified, except the Honorable Mariro, who is supposed to relieve. Anyhow, the honorable members, let's go by our rules. Yeah, you are the ones to make the decision. No, you are the ones to make the decision. The Honorable Robert Pukose has stood in his place and urged that, starting on number 95, that the mover be called upon to reply. It is you to make the decision. And therefore I put the question, that the mover be called upon to reply. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as of the contrary opinion say no? The ayes have it. Mover.
Mr. Speaker, it's very, very unfortunate that we have terminated, or we are coming to an end of this debate. Whereas, Mr. Speaker, we have not interrogated this document properly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would beseech that you allow me to donate 2 minutes, one to Honorable Ounda, Mr. Speaker, and the other one to Honorable Mutunga. Yes, Mr. Speaker, if it is so pleases you, Mr. Speaker, I would want to donate a few minutes, Mr. Speaker, of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable, as a mover replied.
I was requesting, Mr. Speaker.
No, in a situation of this nature, where the House has decided that you reply, you are the one to reply. The others
Okay.
have to just relax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is 1 year since we were elected as members of parliament. For us who are serving the second term, we have 5 years and an extra 1 year, Mr. Speaker. And the member, and the purpose of being a member of parliament, you have 3 laws, cardinal laws. 1, oversight, legislation, and representation. Mr. Speaker, as the captain of the ship that delivered this baby, I want to remain firm with the team and say that we brought to this House a report that is credible, a report that has answered all the questions, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say very, very clearly, if members read this document, some of the questions that were asked here naively would have been answered. Mr. Speaker, the question of health is well addressed. The issue of culpability is well addressed. The issue of ministers was not to indict them. We actually said in the correct language that the relevant agencies to investigate. Mr. Speaker, I believe as a team, as a committee, we did the best. But unfortunately, the speakers who have contributed on this chose only to focus on the issue of the ministers. Whereas we have so many other issues. We have dealt with the issue of how much sugar was imported in the country, who imported, whether the sugar is safe. And I want, Mr. Speaker, to reiterate. I want, Mr. Speaker, to reiterate that observation number 4.3 says, no traces of mercury were detected in the samples collected from seized sugar from market surveillance. It's a strong statement, Mr. Speaker. We went there, we went out there, we went to Mombasa, we went to Kisumu, we went to Eldoret, all those places, Mr. Speaker. And we have brought a good document. Mr. Speaker, we have delivered a baby. The baby boy is a bouncing baby boy who is alive, with all the limbs, with the eyes, with everything intact. It is upon the House today to either kill the baby or circulate and make sure that that baby lives to see tomorrow. But it is all in your hands. I will say that like Pontius Pilate, that I have washed my hands. I have put the document to you. It is a good document. There could be problems here and there, but don't throw the document away basically because you have been told out there. Or
Honorable Koyo, you know, I'm surprised. You know, you are a member of the Committee on Powers and Privileges. When you stand there and you are just shouting across, now I thought you should actually be taken before that committee to go and explain why you are misbehaving.
Document has all those people who imported sugar. If he had interrogated this document, some of these issues would not be having there.
Honorable Ishongwa, what's your point of order?
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
There's a point of order from Honorable Ishongwa.
Honorable Speaker, the point on which the chair is trending on is quite dangerous. Before you cut him short at some point, he was alluding to things happening out there. Now he has just accused the leader of minority, who we hold with great respect as a leader in this House, to be acting like the deputy majority leader. And he knows the honorable, indomitable father of the House, Jimmy Angwenyi, is the deputy majority leader. And the honorable leader of minority has a right. And he said he was conflicted as to whether to articulate issues on political expediency or what is right. Should Honorable Kanini as chair be allowed then to indict the leader of minority on the basis of his conviction of what he was doing, which was right? And in fact, Honorable Speaker, we should allow him to conclude, because without contributing, Honorable Speaker, we set them out on a mission to go and do tests, not testing sugar, so that we can get answers.
Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt in my mind that I will vote with my conscience, that this document is a good document, is a document that we have interrogated, that we have sacrificed so much, that we have done so much as a committee, and I stand with my committee. And I said earlier on, like the captain, I will be the last person to disown this document because I believe this document is good. And I beseech members today, you have to be counted on the right side of history or the wrong side of history. The decision is yours. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honour members, the member for Budalangi again is not in the house. Honour members, I now put the question that this House adopts the report of the joint sittings of the departmental committees on agriculture and livestock and trade, industry and cooperatives on the inquiry into alleged importation of illegal and contraband sugar into the country, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, August 1st, 2018. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say no? No. The nays have it. So now, honour members, are these ones who are walking, are they claiming for a division or where are they? Oh, the Honourable Simba Arati is calling for a division. You need to have another 29 members. And Unfortunately, you don't raise the numbers. You have not raised the number. We go to the next order.
Order number 9.
The next effect is that the report has failed, having been rejected by the House. So it goes back to where it came from.
Order number 9.
Return to sender.
Order number 9, the Circle Societies Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 1 of 2018, second reading.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the chair of Agriculture is not here, and I really indulge you that we defer order number 9, order number 10, and order number 11 because the chairs are not available. And then order number 12 is the finance bill. The House Business Committee have agreed that until they table the report next week, it can be debated on the week beginning 21st. And then the warehouse receipt, Mr. Speaker,
order majority. Let's do it the right way.
Okay.
Let's deal with one after the other.
Okay.
What are you saying about order number 9?
Order number 9, Mr. Speaker, the chair of Agriculture, who is supposed to second on behalf of the stakeholders, is not available, so I want your indulgence to step down.
Well, let's step down. Next order.
Order number 10, the Urban Areas and Cities Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 4 of 2017, second reading.
Leader.
Thank you, Chair. Again, the Chair of Transport was supposed to bring a report. He's yet to bring. I have advised the House Business. I really indulge you to step it down also.
That is step down in light of your request. Next order.
Order number 11, the County Government's Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 11 of 2017, second reading.
Chair, again, the Chair of National Security has written to the Speaker and asked for 1 more week so that he can bring the report to the House on this Senate bill.
Very well, we shall defer that as well in light of the request by the Majority Leader. Next order.
Order number 12, the Finance Bill, National Assembly Bill number 20 of 2018, second reading.
Majority
Speaker,
Leader.
the House Business Committee has confirmed with the Chair of Finance that until he tables the report next week, and on that basis, we ask for a deferment so that it's a very, very important government bill. So the stakeholders' views will ultimately translate into amendments, and we will ask for this bill to be put on the order paper the week beginning 21st of August.
Very well, we shall defer that again in light of the request by the Majority Leader. Next order.
Order number 13, the Warehouse Receipt System Bill, Senate Bill number 10 of 2017, second reading.
Leader, the Majority Party.
Mr. Speaker, we have two bills, one by myself, and I'm seeing another one, Warehouse Receipt Bill from the Senate, word for word. So I need to consult with my colleagues, and I think because it has gone through the Senate, it will be advisable that I will drop mine at the House Business Committee next week so that we carry this one of the Senate. I ask for your indulgence that we also drop it. We also defy it.
Well, that business is deferred in light of the request by the Majority Leader. Next order.
Order number 14, motion, report of the 49th session of the SCP Parliamentary Assembly and intersessional meetings.
Honorable Ole Kato or Maitito, leader of the delegation, he being absent, we shall have that business deferred. Next order.
Order number 15, motion, report of 138th Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union, IPU, and related meetings.
The Honorable William Kamket, MP, leader of the delegation, clearly Honorable William Kamket is as well absent from the chamber. In light of that, we will have that business deferred as well. Next order.
Order number 16, motion, report of the Committee on Members' Services and Facilities on a benchmarking visit to the Parliament of the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland.
The Chairperson, Committee on Members' Services and Facilities.
Absent.
What's happening? The members took leave after that significant business. Yes, what is it, Majority Leader?
Speaker, you know, already tomorrow in our liaison meeting and leadership meeting, because the House has demarcated special seats for chairs. And I think it's not good practice for chairs. And I'm sure the clerk's office must have notified these chairs that their reports are coming. In fact, in the House Business Committee, we have passed on Tuesday that the reports of committees must be given priority today. But again, I don't know whether that has been communicated to chairs, but it's not a good practice. And I really want to take it to the session tomorrow morning.
Yes, Majority Leader, I think that is correct, actually. It's good to raise that with the chairs, because if the business is actually itemized in the order, the chair, at the very least, a member of that committee must be present, so that we don't keep deferring business. Be that as it may be, that business is deferred. Next order.
Order number 17, motion, report on improvement of services and facilities.
Yes, the Chairperson, Committee on Members' Services and Facilities is the same, because it's the same chair. What's your point of order, Honorable Sabura?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we came in to transact business of the House today. The House Business Committee had allotted all this time to the respective motions and reports from various committees as listed in the order paper. It seems that the chairs of various committees are not taking the business of this House seriously. And I would request, Jubilee has enough members of Parliament. Yes. Can you replace the chairmen who are lazy? You appoint other chairmen. We are here to transact business on behalf of the people of the Republic of Kenya. Look.
Yes, Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, Honorable Safuna is the last person in terms of competency, terms of advice to advise the Jubilee Party, which has 175 MPs, compared to his party, which has 12 MPs. Speaker, you know, I'm a pastoralist. You can only be advised by somebody who has the same number of camels that you have, or cows. If you have 100, you can only be advised by a person of 80 camels. This is a man who has 2 camels, and he wants to advise a pastoralist who owns 500. So, Mr. Speaker, you must treat that with the context it deserves. The chairs, we have a meeting, an in-house meeting, which you yourself, as substantive chair, will attend, and we will put our house in order. But I have taken his comments.
Very well, very well. The comment is taken clearly. In light of that, the absence of the chairperson, Committee on Member Services and Facilities, that business 17 is as well deferred. Number members, the time being 5:52 p.m. This House stands adjourned till Tuesday, August 14th, 2018 at 2:30 p.m.
We are very happy we are out of Mercury.